All right, and we're live with Heavy Art Talk, episode 11. Got your regular host, Lee, and I'm honored to have James Bousema here with me. How's your week been, man?
Hey, it's been good. Been busy, but it's the good kind of busy. So it's just, demanded myself to make sure to get out in the hot Vegas sun every now and then for some vitamin D. But, it's been nice. It's been nice. Been a good year for work, and I'm looking forward to talking with you about all of this, this realm that we live in of heavy metal artwork.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen your work more and more in the last year and a half. So it's been really awesome to see, your career take off more and blossom. So definitely excited to dive into that. For the sake of sounding like a boomer, how is the weather in Nevada right now?
Surprisingly not terrible. Vegas has been weird this year in that, it's obviously known for being very hot and dry, but the first quarter of this year was super windy, rainy, and relatively cold for Vegas standards. But now it's starting to get to the, summer season, and it's getting hotter, but it's also surprisingly not bad. It'll be 95, 97, which for us is perfect. Yeah, I'll take that. It's not 115. So we're enjoying it as long as we possibly can, because we know that the hellscape that is the Vegas summer is definitely on the horizon.
Yeah. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and it definitely gets really hot and swampy sometimes.
Yeah.
I went to college near Savannah, so it's even closer to the water, and it was just, it was bad. And it was below what they call the gnat line, so there were just gnats everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty brutal.
That's the thing with us, too, that, once it got hot, all the bugs started to come out, but, Vegas isn't really known for, having lots of bugs. If anything, it's we've got a lot of people with palm trees down here, so scorpions are pretty common. But other than that, nothing gets wet enough for tons and tons of bugs to be around here. So I'm at least thankful for that, because I've been part of my family is in Texas, and I've been in Texas summers, specifically where my mom's half of the family is, which is closer to Louisiana. So it's more of the swampy, sticky part of Texas. And it's just that heat on top of humidity. Nah, I'm good. It's why I recently, last year I got a Gate Creeper shirt, and it's just
the dry heat one, right?
It's a dry heat. It's got skulls and bones at the bottom. Perfect. I mean, they're out of Arizona, so they know all about this.
I have that same shirt. I'm glad I didn't wear it today. But yeah, it was for their it was a COVID concert special one, and I was I just like the aesthetics of it, and it's a beige shirt,
Yeah, it was so different than a lot of their other stuff that they put out, because it has a different logo on it. So I thought oh, this is unique. I'll take this, and it wasn't black. I've got enough black shirts. So.
Random question: do you happen to like that comedy sketch show on Netflix, the I Think You Should Leave, with Tim Robinson?
I haven't watched the new season. I know it just dropped.
There's a sketch about Shirt Brothers. I was about to make a joke about it. It's fresh in my mind. I've watched it twice now, because I find that show is funnier the second time you watch it. And if you have any friends, just ribbing off the stupid little jokes.
And that's why I think it caught on online very well, because it's almost it's part SNL sketches and then part Tim and Eric bits in terms of its
absurdity.
Very absurd. So I feel that kind of humor is really good for quick online, here's a ridiculous thing, sort of meme material. Which is why, when you introduce it to people who, like comedies, and you just sit down to watch it, they're probably going to either love it or hate it.
Oh, for sure.
But the second watch is usually where I'm finding more things to understand about what it's trying to do, or you just laughed at how stupid it is. And I like that kind of stuff where you can go back to it and you get more and more chuckles out of it. Like all the old Will Ferrell movies were like that for me.
Oh, for sure.
Like I don't know,
Step
Anchorman.
Brothers is a classic for me.
But I remember seeing it in the theater and being like, it was okay. I laugh sometimes, and then nowadays I laugh way more because now it for some reason like it just hits harder the more times you see it or you're enjoying it with friends. I've made the mistake way too many times of watching comedies like by myself in the middle of the night and not thinking they're funny. Like, well, yeah, of course you chose the worst environment to watch this kind of movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, that sort of stuff cracks me up. I like it.
Nice. Well, before we get too ahead of ourselves, some of you guys might not be familiar with James individually. I guarantee you, if you're a heavy metal fan, you have seen his work. So I wanted to plug some of the projects he's worked with, and it's pretty astounding. So I'm just going to rattle off some things. I got a sheet here. This isn't all just from memory. But he has worked with bands such as Soulfly, recently Frozen Soul. It's been awesome seeing that partnership form. Disturbed, he did a poster design, I believe, for a Toronto show. Evil Dead 2, he did a poster design. He had this really cool illustration we're going to talk about later for the Las Vegas Raiders. Really unique project. Pull the Plug Patches, awesome patch distributor and creator.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, great company. Kreator, Exodus, Spiritworld, Municipal Waste, and then a lot of other other types of projects. So he's worked with Epic Games, Creeporama. It's pretty safe to say in a lot of ways you've worked with a more diverse project and clientele than anyone else that I've had. Maybe besides Riddick, but
Riddick's been all over the place.
Well, he's got that longevity too, but like you're just from my perspective, your craftsmanship's top notch. But I feel like you also have a level of like professionalism that is probably why you get some of these good clients. And then also just like you can fit in with the vision of some other people. I feel like you're probably kind of flexible because you're very well versed in like all these different types of imagery. And you have a lot of diversity within your portfolio too.
Thanks. And that's totally intentional. I mean, I think as artists, a lot of us, we have our own styles and the way we approach things. And some of it is intentional. Some of it's due to like our own limitations. But my style, I guess, is a little bit more malleable because I just like to use my skills for different projects. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily all line up to the exact same tastes or subject matters. So it's a little harder for me to replicate the style for each because, it's different clients looking for different things. And that's the effect of that is made working for all these clients a lot more fun because I'm not just doing the same piece over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's helped my portfolio expand in a way that brings in a wider clientele. And that's been great. And it's been a huge part of why I think more people have checked out my stuff because they're like, oh, he can do this, and this. Doesn't necessarily mean it's like, oh, he can do this person's style, this person's style, this person's style. It's just that I like being able to form myself into the shape of like whatever is necessary for the project. So if, if people need something a little bit more cartoony and comedic, that's fun. It's great. But part of the reason why I really loved being able to work with the Frozen Soul guys is that like I wanted to show at least album art wise that like, hey, I can do like just the straight on horror themed death metal cover. And that's already helped out a bunch too, because that album's doing well and it's being well received. they were great to work with, the Frozen Soul group, and they're just like that album and their touring is really climbing and climbing and climbing in terms of how much they're getting noticed. So through that, my art gets noticed too, and they're also one of the bands that are very generous with tagging me in their stuff, and like, you know, to all bands out there, please tag your artists. Please, it really helps us out, because everybody's going to be there are other bands watching you, wondering, you know, if you've got a good album cover, they want to know who did it. So and like just that simple tag, every time it happens, I'll get new followers, whether it just be your average people or other bands that I might potentially want to work with, and it just keeps the pipeline going in terms of me being able to make this a sustainable career, because I'm full freelance at this point.
That's awesome, man.
So like it's great, but it also is a sensation of being the train, but also laying down the train tracks at the same time. So it can be a little scary sometimes, because there is a lack of stability sometimes. But luckily, I've gotten to the point where I've got things lined up in a way to where, like, okay, I know what I'm doing this month. I know what I'm doing this month. And then in between all those months, there are surprises too, where somebody's like, hey, I need a shirt design. Can you do it by, this date? Like, okay, here's my rates. Okay, that sounds good. All right, I'll do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things that you just mentioned, I wanted to talk about as well, like beyond just a painterly kind of style that you accomplish digitally, which is really incredible. You have a really good sense of graphic design too, which makes you very balanced. And like, that's why you can take on so many different things too. My wife has a, background in graphic design. She's a user interface designer now, in terms of a career, but I've never personally dabbled in digital art, but I have a great appreciation for it. And I know that, let's just say, if I put a piece of paper in front of you, you still would fucking kick ass. You know what I mean? Like it's not as much of a divide as I think some people think, personally.
Yeah, like if anything nowadays, like I primarily work digital, but I've been itching to just get back more into the traditional style of things.
That's what you got your degree in, right? From
yeah.
At
UNLV, got a bachelor's in drawing and painting. So my main thing was acrylics, just because they worked fast and they super dry fast, especially in a climate like Vegas's. So like even in Vegas, oils still take forever to dry. So I was always an acrylic guy. That and then like maybe going on top of it with a little bit of colored pencil in some places just to sharpen it up. Yeah. So I miss that, but I'm able to work very fast digitally, and more importantly, do edits really quick digitally. So that's why it's just been my go-to for the last probably like 5 to 8 years. It's been just kind of 99% digital. I'll sell originals and have stuff up on my online shop, or go to conventions and bring originals there. But in terms of what clients want, it's all digital. And sometimes that translates to graphic design stuff too, which luckily, like before the pandemic, I worked as a t-shirt designer for many years, and did a lot of stuff for the Strip here for all the local shows, as well as stuff like UFC events.
Cool.
But I also got to have a lot of fun doing stuff for like the Disney parks and the Universal parks. So that kind of helped refine my skills in terms of graphic design and working on things that have to have a limited amount of colors. I wasn't doing the printing or separating or anything, but I still was very much, you've got it's this type of shirt. You only allowed this many colors. Here's the design we need. And that definitely is those skills I'm still using today.
Yeah.
And so I just view all of that as like a different opportunity to learn something that will pay off later. So, who'd have thought that, putting Mickey's and Jack Skellingtons on shirts would help a lot in doing stuff for death metal bands. So it makes me happy.
I think I've found too, with not only listening to like other interviews with, really established artists, but with this show too, is like, people are people. You do the project, you put your passion in it, you ultimately want to get somewhere, but sometimes you have to take those steps. Were you doing those projects right out of school, or what did that kind of look like from graduation to where you're at now?
I mean, in terms of like the client work that I'm doing now, it's really only happened in like the past 3 years. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was mostly my day job, and then on the side doing the occasional client work, but also doing conventions a couple times a year, and then having an online shop. After college, it was mainly very basic graphic design jobs where I'd be, just designing like ads or different posters or for like casinos around town. Did that for a couple of years, because there's events happening all the time. So they need designers to make those event posters, whether it be for clubs or restaurants or, new slot machines. That's the other thing I worked on for a little while. I did some slot art for a few years. And then my last job was the one doing it with the t-shirt business, where I got to do stuff for parks and all that for a couple of years. And, it was fun. But and I think at that point I was part-time and then slowly making my own art business more of a thing. So it was very gradual. And out of college, I didn't have the digital skills that I have now.
Right.
It was way more traditional based, and I had a very different style that was way more cartoony. So, anybody out there thinking that they need to have everything figured out by college and like have their whole, voice completely established and everything by then, it's like, no, you don't. You're going to keep growing and figuring out what you actually want. Because I went to college and thought that I wanted to be a concept artist for like movies and video games.
Yeah.
And I like through that process, made a portfolio that was more geared towards that, where it'd be like character turnarounds, environments,
skins,
prop designs, all that sort of stuff. And then in the process of actually doing that, I realized like, oh man, this is really boring. I don't like this. I'd much rather make the poster for the movie than the concept art process for the movie. Once I figured that out, then I kind of, that pointed me in the right direction, because then I realized like, oh, you want to be an illustrator. Like you'd much rather work. For me, comics was also a thing too. And then I tried doing some sequential art, and I realized like, oh, this sucks. I hate drawing the same character a million times. I'd much rather just like, okay, let me make an awesome cover to sell the thing and then move on. 'Cause I get really sick of things very easily. So sequential art wasn't really, it wasn't.
There's so much to it as well. I'm not saying that you wouldn't be capable of writing a good story, but that's a big element of it. I mean, or you have a partnership with someone, but then you're less independent, So there's always a trade-off.
Yeah. And that wasn't going to be the kind of art that I really love doing. I just, you start to point more towards the things that once you get to the end product, you're like, wow, I'm really happy with that. And I enjoyed the process. And I want that to go out into the world to potentially bring in new work, as opposed to some of the other stuff I was forcing myself to try out because I thought that's what I wanted. And then I realized, like, oh yeah, that if I'm putting this in my portfolio and I don't absolutely like love it, I'm going to start getting clients that are asking me to do things that I don't like. So
Tattooers are the same way.
I bet.
They don't like to post on Instagram the picture that maybe, or the the tattoo that got them, their mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that show, their style, their flash,
Yep, exactly. So yeah, the journey from college to now has been very much one that like wasn't 100% set in stone. It was very gradual. But now I feel like the work that I've been doing the past 2 or 3 years, it mainly started with getting, like many people, getting laid off in 2020, and then just during that whole year, trying to reach out to as many people, try to produce tons of art because now I have the free time.
Yep.
And just saying like, screw it. Okay, here's my portfolio. And 90% of them you get nothing. But also plenty of other people were out there just like working on their projects too and sitting on stuff and having the time to work on it. So that's what kind of brought the Municipal Waste guys to me, and they were the first cover that I did in terms of like a big label record cover. And basically through doing that, which was a great process, love all those guys, and it was like a really fun cover to work on. Through doing that with Nuclear Blast, I'm pretty sure that was like the proof that I could handle more covers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was definitely the foot in the door. And after that, got to do Soulfly. So, even though like the public hadn't seen the Municipal Waste cover that I did, it was done by the end of 2020. And record didn't come out until last year, 2022. So that was definitely just like in the band, they were just sitting on that, waiting for the right time to tour with it.
It's tough for you too, because like you said earlier, the art being out there is an advertisement for you.
Yeah.
So you have to delay that,
Yeah, stuff was dry for a little while, and like now, like I've actually been able to capitalize off of the those benefits of having everything out there. But for a while, I was just kind of sitting on cool stuff that I wanted to show people I had the skills to do, but I couldn't. So it was a matter of like, sitting on that, just trying to get as much work as possible. I definitely had help from my fiance, who was working all through that time, and I couldn't have gotten through it without her. So that's definitely a case where, like, if I was on my own, I don't know, I might have had to get like a day job working at Walmart or something just to pay the bills.
Yep.
But luckily I was able to stay home and really plant all the seeds that were necessary in order to like make all this work now. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I feel similarly with my wife. She sounds kind of similar to yours, very supportive, very much like a team. And she does, we both, do okay financially, but if it ever came down to it and one of us had to lean on another, we have good, solid foundation.
Yeah.
Good to hear about that,
and that's, yeah. And you gotta, especially like during that time where everything was kind of up in the air. It's a matter of like, okay, I got your back. And if this ever happened to me where I was out of work and just needed the support and needed you to take care of things for a little while, I'd be right there for her. But it was just at that time, it was a matter of, I lost the job, but I've got these clients. It's not a lot, but I need the time to be able to do this, because I know that like once this is taken care of, more work's going to come in. Yeah. So
when you were kind of early in COVID and you were sending your portfolio out, was it bands a lot, or were you sending to movie companies and things that are a little more like that as well?
I was sending to anything that I thought would be cool to work on. So it could have been anything from movie studios to gaming studios, but also I'd send my stuff off to places like Mondo or like shirt companies. Like I remember sending my stuff off to the folks at Death Saves, the Joe Manganiello D&D line that he does. Those kind of companies where it's like it's all like my interests, but they also have like a cool aesthetic that I know that I could apply my own skills to. So there's a lot of sending stuff out to those places. A lot of them didn't get back to me, or if they did get back to me, it's not immediate. So you kind of have to just like, fiance always says, because she also is a freelancer sending, portfolios off to clients, and it's like, just submit and forget.
You said voice acting, right?
Yeah. She's a voice actor. So she's very much, I think she appreciates all the work that goes into like you being your own business and having to weather the storm of competing with so many other people on the market that's many of them are better than you at stuff. But if you're able to sell yourself right and demonstrate your skills in a way that looks promising to potential clients, then you can get it. Because if folks out there are looking for new people to work with. So that, I think, part of working through the pandemic was there were a lot of companies that were also out there looking for new people because they knew that a lot of us artists were just like sitting at home and could work from home. So I think through some of the clients that I got was just through like Twitter tags. There's like portfolio days happen like every other month on Twitter. So, and art directors are out there looking at them. They're scrolling through that hashtag, seeing like, okay, what's new? What looks cool, but what are people also like engaging with? Which unfortunately is a thing that we have to compete with. But like that's just how this works. So, you got to deal with it. Like there's just going to be some people with bigger audiences than you that you have to somehow make your stuff stand out amongst all of that. But yeah, I would get art directors reaching out to me through stuff like that, or fortunately sometimes bigger artists would share my stuff and then would introduce my stuff to other bigger audiences. And that's another thing, I now like to share a lot of other people's stuff, even though I know they're my competition technically.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember what it was like to just be like, please, I only have a couple hundred followers, just somebody share my stuff. And then suddenly, sometimes those people, they just need the right person to share and see like, oh, this person's awesome. Let me give him a follow. And it helps everybody, I think. And because nowadays I'm in a place where like, I do have a lot of regular clients that come back to me. Okay, we'd like some more of this, which is great. But there was a time in which, I would have begged just for them to like barely notice me.
Yeah.
So I'm very try to be very aware of like, okay, like share other people's stuff, because you never know what art directors out there looking for something new, and it still helps me too, because there will be artists that share my stuff, and then I suddenly get a new following from a new subset of fans. and it really helps. So please, like our work as artists, like we put a lot of work into this stuff, but it's hard for it to feel like the work is worth it unless it's able to get to a certain amount of people to appreciate.
Totally.
And obviously, like the amount of people that follow you or like your stuff doesn't equate to your work's quality or worth or anything like that.
And that's a tricky thing to
It is.
keep in mind, man.
Yeah. I've had plenty of pieces that I think are like personal favorites, but they do terrible online.
Dude, I was going to talk to you about that because that's such an artist thing, I mean, songs too. Bands talk about it all the time. Oh, I wrote this song in 30 minutes and everyone loves it. And I spent 2 months on this song. It doesn't get any attention. Happens every time.
Yeah. Like quick sketches sometimes or like ideas that are like the dumbest.
Yeah.
Will like be able like really click with people, but things that I really like overthought and maybe over painted a little bit, people are like, oh, that's cool. Like, come on.
You bring up a lot of good points though, man. Like, I mean, naturally I'm a competitive person, but so much of it is controlling your ego and being like, at the end of the day, I'm an art fan.
Yeah.
So I just love seeing other artwork. I also love talking with other artists. I like making friends. I like networking. So I think you bring up a good point where the competitiveness, as long as it doesn't cross that line, is a good way to push everyone forward.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing. And there's always going to be somebody bigger.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. You have, way more clients than I do at this point, but at the end of the day, I enjoy what I do, getting there over time. And that's why I'm also grateful that people, hop in and listen to this conversation because some people might perceive me being way bigger than I am. But no, I'm just some Joe Schmo. You know what I mean? That works a day job and does this as a passion hobby at this point.
Well, I mean, same here too, because like, although I'm like full freelance, I'm not like swimming in dough. I'm doing okay. I'm able to pay my bills and pay for my dog's food and stuff, and occasionally go get myself a treat or something. But like, it's the thing about being an artist. Like, even if you're in the upper echelons of it, you're probably not.
You're not
probably
loaded.
not. Yeah. So like I'm pretty average, but like the way I see it is like, oh, I'm able to do freelance full time and able to pay my bills, pay my groceries, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, I'm doing okay. So let me see how long I can keep this going. So that's the other thing. Longevity is the thing that I'm starting to think of more often too, because I'm now getting to work on really cool stuff and slowly checking off things that I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to work on that. Oh shit. Okay. This is happening now.
Well, you got to adjust your rates at the same time too.
That's the other thing. Like I'm now noticing, and you only figure that out through experience too.
Yep.
Where you get a job that you really wanted to work on, you finish it, you get paid for it. And then you realize, oh yeah, that's just one paycheck. And, maybe a month or two later, oh, that's gone. Okay. Got to work on more stuff. It's that realization that like even the dream jobs are still just a gig with, you get paid for it. Okay. Move on to the next thing. So it takes that, doesn't take the allure away, but it takes like the magic of it away a little bit, because you realize that like, okay, well, that dream gig was basically like groceries, mortgage, and a cell phone bill, and maybe one or two other things.
It isn't as romantic in reality as you would like.
Yeah. So and that's fine though. Like, but that does mean that like, over time, especially now that I'm getting more clients, more people interested. So I now and luckily in a position where there are some things that I have to say no to, or that I have to up my rates to kind of like weed out. Well, not weed out, but it is a way of seeing like, okay, here's my rate. Because I know how much time and effort is put into this, and I know there is an element of knowing how much the client wants you to, and wants that art, and my thing is that I work like pretty fast too. Mm-hmm. So like part of the selling point for me is that like, okay, I can get it to you pretty quick, and I can get edits to you very quick. There's a value in that. So once you like put a number on things that's a little bit more than you used to put on, then it means you will lose some clients, but it does mean the ones that want you really, really want you. And you're going to be way more thankful at the end of the day that you asked for more, because all that time's now going to be put towards something that's actually worth your time instead of just something because you need something.
I mean, there's no shame in having leverage that comes with confidence and a track record. Like, I think that's totally on point, man.
Yeah, and part of it is also just like I think with a lot of bands and stuff in particular, we're working with metal bands, so it's not like a lot of them are also swimming in money, especially if they're touring is very expensive and everything. But the way I view it is like, okay, this album art is like a one-time purchase, but for a thing that will pay off in multiple ways in the future, and it will always be there. So it's worth it to just pay a little bit more upfront, so that I'm taken care of, but also you guys get a good piece of art that you can use forever, for merch, for advertising purposes, for banners, of course, the actual records sales, like all that. I feel like it's in the grand scheme of things, a small gesture to just pay your artists what they're worth, and or at least if you're an artist out there looking for worth, to know your worth in terms of your rates instead of underselling yourself just to get the gig.
Depending on where you're at in your career.
Yes. That's the caveat.
Your position and my position are different at this point, which is totally fine. I
fully acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Because like getting into this business, like in 2020, I was definitely underselling myself.
Yeah.
I was definitely doing things just so that I can do them. And just because I needed money, and two, some of them were just foot in the door situations where I know that if I do this, then that might start a domino effect. Because I just want my skills to be proven to other potential clients. So I'm now in a position to where I can ask for more, and still not asking for the world. But that definitely did start from a place of, not asking for much, but just wanting the gig. But that's now paying off. I'm glad I was in a position to where I could just stick through it.
No, that's great to hear, man. And like, the people who do watch this show, a lot of them are artists in the scene as well. And I sometimes get, messages and emails and stuff, and they're like, man, that last one really hit home for me. And it's like, I feel like that person has been experiencing the same thing as me. And it's just like, it's validating. So that's been something really cool to like hear from people and stuff. You were talking earlier a little bit about, when it comes down to the reality of being a working artist versus the romantic, the one thing that I romanticize, and it's not that it's even, it's a fantasy at the end of the day, but artists that worked in like the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, I definitely view that stuff in a romantic kind of way. Because I don't think about it, having the pressures of social media even doing things digitally, there's a romantic quality to drawing and painting traditionally, but do you resonate with that at all? Or
I mean, yes. I think when I was going to college, I wanted to be more of a traditional like gallery artist.
Yeah.
Or at least like have stuff in galleries, but also do stuff for like in illustration purposes or for whether it's for movies and video games, stuff like that. I mean, I was a college kid. I didn't have a lot of focus. I just wanted to do art. And,
Yeah.
but you're a kid, so it's hard to know exactly what you want to do until you try it out. But like, I do look at a lot of old covers and specifically wonder like, okay, so how did that band get to know that artist? If I'm thinking of a time before email, before texting, man, they really gotta. I'm sure a lot of them were like, hey, found this guy. My brother has this friend who does art. Let's have him do the cover, and then they end up being like a famous artist later on. But it was just through like circumstances at that point. It is cool seeing like the development of some of them over the years, where you'd see like stuff some of those artists were doing in the 80s, and it's very rough because it was probably like real quick for a band that didn't have a lot of money. And like, okay, here's something, but now it's iconic. Like I wonder, okay, I don't know off the top of my head, but I wonder like, okay, who did the like Haunting the Chapel art for Slayer, and where are they now? It might be a big artist. I don't know off the top of my head.
A little that comic style to it, right?
It does, but
in my head.
But looking at it, I can't imagine that was something that like Slayer had a ton of money to give that artist.
Or Show No Mercy. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, and now I wonder like, okay, what did they get paid, and like do they know that that's like super iconic now? Do they get anything from that? Like, are they still getting work from it? Is there any residuals? I mean, for a lot of bands that I work with and everything, like there isn't really a residuals situation. It's kind of a one-time commission fee, and like maybe you'll get some other work, or maybe they'll just be like, hey, here's some free merch, all that, buy a drink at the show or put you on the list at the show. But unless you work with like the gigantic bands, like if you get to like, if you were lucky enough to work with Metallica, like maybe they do something like that. But even then, I'd imagine it's still, okay, we found it. Our team found an artist, and they did a piece for us. But
that's definitely like an art director agency type situation. At least that's what it feels like.
Yeah,
at least with the last Metallica album,
Yeah, they've moved on from doing illustrated covers for a while. I mean, I do, as much as I don't love the album, I like the Saint Anger art.
It's iconic.
Yeah, no, like I think that's great. But they've moved a different direction, or at least everything looks less illustrated and more like digital manipulations of photos and stuff. But
they do go for that singular image, magnetic, like it's.
I like the Death Magnetic cover. Like I think that's okay. I get it. It fits the name of the album. Hardwired, I didn't love that cover as much.
That was rough.
Yeah, I like the concept of 72 seasons, and the actual like record design and everything. And shit, right? Yeah, it looks great. Like it's a really well designed package. So they needed somebody for that. But I don't know. In terms, I guess, to get back to like your initial question, like in terms of the allure of old school ways of doing things, it's nice, but I much prefer nowadays where getting to know the artist is as easy as them DMing me on Instagram and being like, hey, can you do a shirt design? I mean, honestly, a lot of the work that I do nowadays is just from that. Like a band will reach out to me, usually on Instagram, be like, dude, we like your stuff. You want to do this? Okay. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I love the ease at which I can just share my stuff, get people to notice it, and communicate with potential clients just on the fly. Because I can be at a show and be like, hey, I'm here. Would love to meet you guys or whatever. Oh yeah, we're over here. Come say hi. And then like that.
By the guy with the Pantera shirt near the soundboard. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
let's avoid that guy, but okay.
That's how it is sometimes, though. Yeah. I think part of the reason why I've been able to keep things pretty steady is that I'm just a fan, and I like working with the people that I work with, and I like the stuff that they do. So it just makes it a lot easier to be able to communicate back and forth about shared interests, or especially if they have a album concept in mind, like me already being decades long fan of metal at this point. I know what they want and what they don't want. That is something you can't teach, being a fan of this sort of stuff.
Definitely.
So I think through that, and I think now, because the albums that I had worked on in 2020 and 2021 have now all come out, mainly Municipal Waste, Soulfly, and Spiritworld. Because of those records, I'm good, because I can now show to any band, hey, I've done those 3, and because of those, bands like Frozen Soul have reached out to me like, hey, want to try out our new covers? And now having done that, I'm so glad to have now done a death metal cover, because that now expands what potential bands think that I'm capable of. So I'm just.
It is interesting that. And there's nothing against any of the bands or anything, but sometimes people won't realize that you're capable of doing something when deep down it's like, yeah, I could do any genre. I'm a well-versed artist, and I'm speaking for you, but you can tell me if I'm wrong here. But sometimes it's like, oh, you can do death metal too. It's like, well, yeah, I'm still just drawing and painting.
Yeah. We all have our limitations, but it's up to us to step up to the plate if we're given an assignment. We would all love if every client asked us to do the things that we are really great at, but most of the time that doesn't happen exactly like that. Or something that I do with clients is I'll usually in the preliminary stages, I'll send them 2 to 3 sketch concepts, very rough, but just to give them a spectrum to see okay, it could be this, or this. And us artists, we have our favorites, and 9 out of 10 times the client doesn't pick the favorite. Yeah. So and you just have to deal with it. For the Frozen Soul record, we were doing a lot of back and forth different concepts, because it took a little while to land on the one we went with.
Composition you're talking about?
Yeah, it's composition, because we had the main subject matter, but it was a little vague at first, because I think they wanted to see what I could come up with. But through the process of doing sketches, things got ironed out more, and that concept didn't come until quite a few sketches later. And even once we landed on that, which was not the sketch composition that I preferred, once I started developing it and leaning more into like the details that they wanted and really being in a position to make the you're in a position to basically take the thing that you weren't initially in love with and make it work. And that's its own challenge because, client wants what the client wants. But I'm glad they pushed me because it ended up being a cover I'm really proud of. I think it ended up being a cover that's very much like it is 100%. You see that in that, yep, that's a Frozen Soul record. Especially with them, it being their sophomore record. It's very much, it's full of detail. It's big. It gets across the record title. And I think it's also like kind of that horror centric feel that they're really going for. Especially like paired with the art on the back too. It's been they've got their like pickaxe guy, and it's a view from inside the mouth of the glacial creature.
I didn't realize it was from the mouth. Well, that's sick.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way. That's really neat.
It's a different view of the art, and that took a couple tries too to figure out how we were going to do it. But yeah, it's got like the chains wrapped around the teeth that he's standing in front of, and then the blood coming down the sides where the eye sockets are.
I'm just looking at it here.
Yeah.
Let the audience look at it.
Man, I can't wait. I'm waiting on my copy right now. It's in transit. So I love seeing people post that, especially the vinyl, because it just looks great on that 12x12
it's
format.
Cool too. The way you got the wind blowing the snow.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's got that movement to it, which is really nice.
Yeah, where like the snow after like blowing a certain way for a while just kind of freezes.
Yep.
Too. But like that's a whole process where you just kind of have to go with what they like, but trust. It's a weird back and forth of like doing what they want, but also letting them know, hey, I think this would look good. If you want to go with this, let's try this. So that way it's a balanced effort so that you get to make sure that your creative knowledge that they're hiring you for is used and utilized in a way that gives them a good cover, but it's still their concepts. So you kind of have to, as an artist, remove, you got to humble yourself a little bit, because ultimately it's their record, their music, and their statement they're making out into the world. But you're part of that team. But it's different than you just making your own piece and putting it out there.
I got two questions related to that. So, well, one's more of a statement, but it sounds like the partnership you developed with the Frozen Soul team, what's cool as well is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they're like, we want you and we're going to work with you on these designs, but there's never any of that like weird thing where it's like they're looking to back away. It's more like, let's refine, which I think is really important. You know what I mean? Like they seemed committed to you despite like some drafts going back and forth, which I think is a really important thing. I was watching a podcast the other day, and it was like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. They were talking about like, and this, I'm not saying any of yours were bad ideas, but he was saying, don't judge me on my bad ideas, judge me on my good ideas. And I thought that was a really cool concept.
Yeah. I think like it's really great when clients give you room to figure things out, because I think too many times, especially when you're at like, say you have an art day job, there is a pressure for like you to like whatever your first idea is, go with that, because the thing has to be made. So like sometimes with clients, I'll have that just because it's a very like they're really tight on schedule, so I just have to like go. But I really appreciate the clients that give you time to sketch through ideas and like I'm sure you're very much aware of the process of like getting out your shitty ideas. Like, okay, let me just like blurt out what first comes to mind and see what it looks like. Sometimes what's in here doesn't look good on the page. And then through that, you're able to bounce off that and come up with other means of doing things. So with them, it was all about, there's concepts that I gave them initially that I thought like, yeah, this is the cover. Nope, didn't go with that. but they were like, I'm so appreciative of being able to do that album art, because even when they said, no, that's not what we want, they were still like, try this. And giving the artist the room to do that, and the artist also taking that as like, not personally.
Yeah.
It's more about like, okay, we got to figure it out. Like I just think of all like the character designs or poster designs that definitely aren't the first idea, or I think back to like the original Predator design for the Predator movie. Nothing like what they eventually went with, but they had to try that out in order to realize like, that doesn't work. Let's go with something different. And then they ended up with something iconic. So that probably sucked for the artists working on it. But I'm sure overall they're glad that like, oh, okay, we tried something different, and that ended up being way more interesting. So like it's part of it is having the right clients that give you that room. Mm-hmm. And then part of it is, I think the artist being able to take that criticism and take that idea of like, hey, your first sketch we didn't fall in love with, like, it's okay. That's why you're there to give them options. Of course, there are limitations too. That there are times when clients, maybe want too many edits or too many adjustments. But that's why I like to establish like things in the sketch pretty early on. Like, this is what you want, right? Like, we're good with this idea. And that way later on, they're not like, oh, could you also add like, 15 cars? Like, what? What?
Yeah, I want a monster truck going down the slope.
Yeah.
Like a snowmobile.
Yeah. As much as like, I'm sure that'd be fun. That's very much like, well, I can't just draw a monster truck. Like, that takes time. Like, I don't think I've ever done that. So you got to give me time and probably compensate me more in order to like add something completely different. Because now it's just more and more art that I'm making. So yeah, I'm very, very appreciative of clients that have been pretty cool about that. But part of it is also like, man, digital art really helps being able to just like easily go back and forth. Like, okay, here's an update. I don't have to scan it. I don't have to photograph it or anything, or worry about like, oh, I'm out of this color, or I scratched the surface, or I need to start on a new canvas or anything. My
cat knocked over my inkwell.
Oh, man.
Shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd imagine like that there are plenty of pieces that you loved that now have.
I keep my cat away if I have the watercolors out. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Good. Because we don't have cats, but from what I've heard horror stories about them wanting to, they just want to be wherever you are.
Yep.
And they don't know what you're doing. They're just like, oh, this is a surface I can be on.
Yeah.
And if you're working on art, they don't have the concept of creatively applying paints to a surface in order to make something visually pleasing. They're just like, oh, give me food.
Pretty much, man. Okay, with your sketch back and forth and stuff, do you ever do phone or like Zoom call consultations, or is it pretty much just email and messenger and stuff?
Some clients, some like to do over the phone calls, because I feel like that through that you're able to just like get all the ideas out pretty easily. and also bounce off of each other pretty well. I like phone call. I feel like I'm a millennial. I think you are too.
Yeah, I'm
right?
31. How old are you?
I'm 33, so like we're around the
Same
same
age, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I know there's plenty of us and Gen Z that are like almost allergic to phone calls. I love them. Because I hate waiting for somebody's email. After like as soon as I send off an email, I want somebody to like answer me right away.
You start getting a little anxious,
But I get super anxious about that stuff because I'm very impatient when it comes to like getting answers from people. But you know, I'm not like a dick about it or anything. But like personally, like if a client wants to call me over the phone to talk about stuff, I love it.
Yeah.
I love just getting those ideas out there and asking them like right after something like, oh, do you mean this? And then they can either hit me back with like, oh yeah, or oh no, that's not at all what I meant. So that I can instantly get that answer and clarify things pretty well. But not every client is like that. In fact, a lot of them, it's just through either DMs or emails. I mean, with the Soulfly cover, it was mainly talking through Nuclear Blast, and then Max's wife, who takes care of a lot of his stuff because he doesn't have social media. So like that was a process where I just, you know, kind of heard some feedback. This looks good. Take care of this. And then gradually sent them updates and got the okays from it. But that was a process that was very much like, okay, they want this, and I do the work and submit it, send them an invoice.
That was a pretty streamlined one.
It was, yeah. So like some clients are, you know, they've either got stuff to do, or they don't like talking on the phone, or they like to keep things pretty just like professional in terms of like, I'm hiring you to do this, please do it. Thank you very much. Here's your money. So
nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with that. You know, you don't have to be best friends with everybody. So like, and some people are also just not very social. Yeah. So there's plenty of bands out there that, you know, they like their personality and passion comes out in the music and the art that they make, but maybe they're not super talkative. And they don't like all the social media stuff. That's fine. I totally get it. My view when it comes to working with clients is like, I want you to have a very easy time and not have to worry. So I try to treat everybody, you know, super nice, super easy to work with, you know, and very laid back. I don't want anything to be a struggle, and I want you to get the thing that you want. So try to make it an easy and potentially fun process. That way everybody's happy. But yeah, so sometimes that means you make friends with the clients. Sometimes that means you never see them and never talk to them again. So, yeah, that's all right.
But hey, man, it's that right level of professional yet approachable. It's awesome. Yeah. I think that's great. We're having such a good flow without me even looking at my questions, but I'm trying to think. Anything you wanted to talk about?
Oh, well, I was like mainly curious because so you worked primarily traditional, right?
Yeah, currently I don't do anything digitally. I got nothing wrong with it.
Does it just not feel right to you? Have you tried it out enough to like really get a feel for it? Or
I have dabbled in Procreate, which I think is very user friendly.
It's great.
You use Photoshop CS6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I did for a while, but then like,
are you on the subscription now?
Yeah, like once I changed, I think it was years ago, I had to change computers, and once I did that, like for some reason CS6 wouldn't
they start forcing
download. Yeah, so I had to go on the subscription, which I hate.
Gouge every month. Yeah. No,
Yep.
I feel because my wife does a lot of things digitally, so I'm exposed to it. I think for me, well, number one, it's not my primary mode of money, so different pressures for me.
Yeah.
My pressure right now is just I want to build a portfolio of stuff that I like, and every once in a while I'll take commissions.
Good.
I want to get more, but I know where I'm at right now. I just want to make work that I'm proud of and keep learning and getting better, which comes with working commissions too, but of course. But I'm kind of on my own like kind of self-education journey because I didn't go to art school. But yeah, I enjoy painting. I enjoy the feeling of it. The fact that you can't edit poses, different challenges, which I think are exciting.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's my job is in, the software industry. So I'm in front of a computer for a lot of times. So when I can just get, paper and pen, it just feels a little more relaxing.
I'm
so
telling you,
where
man.
I'm at right now.
Yeah. Like I do get sick of the screen.
Yeah.
And sometimes just a pen and paper feels like a vacation, because now it's just like the limitations are oddly freeing, because like if you make a mistake, it's like, well, work with it.
Yeah.
See what you can do with it. If it doesn't completely screw up the piece, then you got to use that creative energy and that just like your own taste and judgments to make something look cool, or rip it out of the sketchbook, start over.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely make a lot of mistakes, and it humbles you too. So I am not some kind of snooty dude who's like, digital is it's you get different pros, you get some cons, but really not many. There's way more cons with traditional. I bet if I was in your shoes, I would do digital the whole way, because you're doing projects where doing edits on a dime, like it's so helpful. Whereas with me, it's like, oh shit, my heart's pumping. Like I can't do what you're saying. It's too late. Sorry, man. So that kind of position, if I keep the trajectory I'm on and I get more projects and I eventually do find myself in that position, I'll be like thinking back to this conversation, be like, yeah, probably should have taken that hint and got a little more versed in digital, Well,
I think with traditional artists, if anything, you guys have to more than me nail down exactly what the client wants, like pretty early on, and send them updates. Times. Yeah, like this is what you want, right? And when you send them updates, like, hey, it's coming along, and make sure like this is it, right? And that's also where you can get into stuff like, okay, do you have like a contract written up to where it has like certain rules in place where it's like, okay, I will give you this amount of sketches by this time, and the piece will be done by this time, and for depending on who you're working with or whatever, like do you want like half up front, then half when it's done? Because with some of these projects, they can last for a while, and artists needs their money. You can't wait forever for it. So it's good to have sometimes a chunk up front. But yeah, I'd imagine as traditional artists, like it's got to be pretty clear what you're giving them, and that they can't just throw in something out of nowhere in the middle of the process without you guys being like, okay, it's going to be a little extra. If you
Brad Moore talks a lot about that in the episode, just having to be very clear on that. And he's like you in the sense that he's, very established and professional, and like he knows his worth. And I like that he can carry his weight around in a respectful way. Like we need more
especially
people like
him.
That.
He's so like he's been in it for a while now.
Since the 80s,
yeah. So he's like a legend at this point. Mm-hmm. Like it's so weird. Like I the past year or two, I've had just major imposter syndrome.
Really?
Where like it's that feeling of if I see one of the records that I've worked on in a store, I feel like why is why is my stuff up there? It's supposed to be in my computer at home. Like, why is it out there looking like a professional piece of work that I'd be into if I didn't do it? And it's that sense of like, we are our own worst critics.
Yeah.
And we always want to work a little bit more on a piece to perfect it. But at some point you need to submit it and it has to be done. And
knowing that line is harder digitally than traditionally, in my opinion, too.
Yeah,
you can keep tweaking.
Yeah, and I've had to learn that, like, okay, do you really need an extra 5 hours on this, or is it done? You know, like, because as a digital artist, there is that tendency to, like, I could potentially overwork this thing, and that's why it's really important to save your drafts, save multiple versions of things, save your layers, because I'll sometimes work on a thing for hours and hours and then toggle, hide the work that I added to it, and then realize, like, oh, that didn't improve the piece at all. I was just like noodling around and thinking that, like, oh, more detail here would make it better.
Where it gets you.
Yeah. And it's usually like, no, the overly detailed additions don't make the piece better. It's the overall concept that makes the piece work.
That first 30 minutes has the biggest impact.
Yeah, where, like, your composition, choice of colors, and values are number one.
Yes.
The details, that's all just, to make it look real nice up close. But it's got to work at its roughest stage. So, like, that's something that I very much have to remind myself of, because I can, just go into the, like, hours and hours and hours, and then after a certain point I have to realize, like, hey, you've already worked a lot on this piece. You're almost now working to the point where, like, you're underselling yourself because you're putting so many hours into a piece.
It's like, how zoomed in are you on these little mini guys here,
So with those, that was a fun process, because that was very much me learning how much actual work goes into making, like, a crowd scene, which I hadn't quite tackled before. Luckily, they were all, like, skeletons and all like the same color, and it wasn't like, clashing armies with all different armors and everything.
Like a crowd at, like, a basketball game.
Right, which I dread ever doing something like that. I don't know how I would tackle it.
Impressionistic.
Yeah, make it super sloppy. Yeah. But with doing the Glacial Domination cover, the longer we went on, the more Chad was like, okay, more skeletons, needs more. It needs to look like a lot of them. Because when we initially started out, so, like, I'm glad he pushed me to do more, because when it started out, it's like, okay, yeah, that's a group of skeletons, but it needs to look like they're coming down from the slopes towards the viewer. So you got to fill up some space. This isn't just like, a friendly group of skeletons. This is all about glacial domination.
Game of Thrones, less, party.
So because of that, I also knew that, like, okay, James, you can't make every skeleton super sharp. You can't make it. Not every skeleton's going to be your masterpiece or whatever. That's what the closer ones, the ones that are closer to the viewer, make those look good. You almost have to view it as like putting costumes on extras on a set. Or I think back to, like, Lord of the Rings, where they would have their master orcs that they work really hard on, all the prosthetics and all the details and everything that look good really close.
I'm just gonna have it up.
Sure,
we're talking so much about it.
Yeah, sure. They would have the ones that look great for the close-ups, but in the back they'd be like really cheap, quickly put together masks but they just need to be put on an extra just to fill the space. So when I would go up really close to get, like, all the tiny skeletons in that picture, they're pretty rough. Like they're very much like, okay, the rib cage, a couple strokes, the arm just one stroke, and the head's just like a little blob. But when you zoom out, it communicates all that it needs to.
You just need a little bit of that proportion.
Yeah,
That's the most important part.
yeah. You just
scale.
need to figure out, like, these are closer to the viewer, these are farther away, these are at this place in the landscape. And like you need enough of them to communicate the whole army idea that they wanted. So that was its own challenge, and definitely like a new one for me, to the point where, like, by the end of it, I was very much not down to do any skeletons for a little while. But I'm very happy that I pushed through and did as many that are on there, because it's a better version of what it was maybe like 2 versions before, where I maybe as an artist would have called it done. Yeah. But in terms of what needs to sell the image, I'm glad they were like, nah, keep going, man. Like you're almost there. So
I can see the text thread now. So you're like this, and it just says more skeletons.
Yes,
like, more skeletons. No.
It was more blood, more skeletons. Which I'm very happy that that's what my clients are asking me to do.
Yeah,
that's fun.
So, how would you describe the kind of like frost giant creature in the back? Like, how do you perceive that?
Well, it was weird, because like initially I thought that they wanted like a actual structure, almost like a Castle Grayskull sort of thing, but just like made of ice. But they more and more implied that they wanted something that maybe looked alive. So they didn't necessarily tell me like, okay, we want his arm rising out of the snow or anything, but it was more about like, okay, let's see what ideas you come up with. And I honestly, the thing that came to mind early on was like, you're a 90s kid, so you remember the animated Hercules movie.
Yes.
So you remember the Ice Titan?
Yes.
Like, that's what I thought of.
Yeah, shards. And
yeah.
Jagged shapes. Oh yeah, I see it now.
We're almost like I could see him when he was like walking, like he'd almost have to pull his leg out from the earth, and all the icicles were left there from where he stepped. Like, I really liked that concept. So like, okay, let me sort of try that as like a direction point of like what this thing could potentially look like. Because that's the other thing, like designing a monster is hard, because they didn't want it to be like a demon. So like I wouldn't give it like horns or anything. There is one like coming out of the side of him that has like horns and stuff, but it was more about like, okay, how do I anthropomorphize a mountain, or a moving ice structure of some kind. So we needed like a mouth, needed some eyes because we wanted the blood coming out of it. But then we also started adding different things to sell the concept, which was like, okay, so he's got a bunch of chains coming out of his mouth, and a lot of them are broken, and you can see where they were like attached at the ground below him. So this is about a monster being released off of from like whatever it was, the snow that covered it, as well as any sort of chains that kept it down. So it's all about like adding details to amplify the theme. So like those chains may not be initially something that you notice, but the more you look at it, I think with a lot of my work, like I want to put in enough detail to where like the more you look at it, the more things you notice and the more things that you can appreciate. And it's also more things for the band to take from in terms of like other.
It's all for the sake of the story.
Yeah. So it's trying to, you really want to complement the thing that they're trying to accomplish with their overall themes on the record, and especially the title of the record. So that was a fun process. It's weird, like this cover actually came together pretty quick, just because we were doing it later last year, and the I guess the whole process of printing it and like developing everything after all the art and the record is finished, that's its own big process. But they needed the art by like December 15th, because I think the whatever places that print it and everything were like overseas or something, like in Europe.
That's still a pretty quick turnaround, though. Like from December to May, for the release, like that's faster.
Well, they were like pushing it too, because they were like, well, we want this to come out in the summer, so we kind of need this by a certain point. And I guess also like parts of Europe take like a month off after like December 15th. So it's not until like January sometime that they go back to work again, at least the parts that they needed to work with. So this needed to get in by a certain time. So that also forced me to paint more with the approach that I needed to do things that were necessary for the cover, not things that were just me
meddling around.
Yeah. It's like, okay, you got to get to the point. What does this need to communicate? And it was hard with a cover that has a lot of detail. So it's hard to just like get to the point with so many things to balance. But I think because Chad wanted a cover that had a more painterly texture to it and very, kind of rough on the edges a little bit. It's still like super detailed, and it's definitely like using my skills, but it's a little rougher in some places than I would maybe initially go for, but it totally worked for what they wanted. And the fact that, it's like icebergs and snow flying around and everything, you're kind of allowed to be a little less clean with your details. And it all helped in just adding more depth to the texture.
Yeah. Mind if I speak on it?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so like I think you just really nailed your initial mapping of the values and the lighting, and that's what pulls the most weight on the strength of the cover. And then all those details, everything are supplemental and tell the story, the chains, the skulls. But what, has that immediate, like, okay, I'm looking at it from a distance and it's reading really well, is that pop of light right in the middle. So it drags the eye right up to the Castle's gray skull type of thing.
Yeah.
And then you see the slope, you see the blood, and then those, dark edges on the side just kind of wrap you in. And I think that's what makes it so strong, is you got this strong, landscape. Color scheme is obviously really great, but you knew where to draw the eye. You knew where to make details and where not to. And that's what makes it so it's easy to dissect from a distance and up close. So you nailed it, dude.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate, because that's all very much intentional. Yeah. Because especially now that this is my fourth cover that I've done, and you learn something with each one, especially seeing the different ones printed and everything, and seeing how stuff looks on, what does it look like on a 12x12, which is the vinyl? What does it look like on, I think it's like 6x6 CD? And then what does it look like on a cassette? So it all needs to communicate at various different sizes, especially, it's got to look good on your phone. Yeah. It's got to be able to translate. That's why throughout the process, I very, very much often send sketches to myself on my phone to see if it translates at that size. It's something that I actually kind of learned with working on slot game art. because a lot of the slot stuff that I worked on was also on like cell phone slots. So, this graphic that I'm working at, this size on my screen in front of me is going to be this big. So like you need to not noodle around too much. Or if you do, you got to make sure that those details translate this big. And so that kind of forces you to focus way more on values and composition that leads your eye in the right place. So I do also often do a layer on Photoshop where it's just like a color layer that turns everything black and white.
Okay.
So in black and white, you see the values way more and see where like, oh, this is blending into this, and I need a harder edge, or I need some real contrast in this to make this pop, because that's something that I had to balance out with the Spiritworld cover, because that's such a saturated cover compared to this one.
Yeah.
This one's way more like muted and monochromatic. But when you're dealing with something that's really saturated, that's got all sorts of colors, you can kind of over rely on colors to give you your visual information. But if you try looking at it just purely through values in black and white, it'll usually show you like the shapes that are actually communicating in the piece. So like with this, with a lot of my pieces, I also often like test myself, like, okay, take the glasses off.
Yeah.
Can I see what's going on? Can I make out shapes?
Some Monet shit right there, man.
Yeah, I mean, like that.
I do the same thing.
That's good because it makes sure that like, okay, whatever I'm doing, is it something that somebody from a distance, like just casually looking at it, will it grab them? Will they like quickly be able to in their head be like, oh, that's what I'm looking at? Because you kind of need to look at it that way, because the audience that Frozen Soul's trying to grab, like visually, I want to make sure that they get it immediately. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's the new Frozen Soul, or that's a big ice monster. So, and that just comes with plenty of years of doing stuff that doesn't communicate great, and then learning like, oh, this is what I was doing wrong. This is what I need the eyes to focus on, not this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, like that spot of light on the mountain leading upwards, all the line work that comes with the strokes on the actual monster, and then the blood coming down, leading your eyes more to the crowd below, and then in reverse ways, the blood leads up to the monster. Like it's all meant to kind of like wrap back into itself so that the viewer sees everything pretty clearly.
Yeah, I got two quick things. But like, let's say, so you did not make this decision, of course, but just for the sake of the audience, imagine that spot of light in the middle of that mountain, instead of having shape and form and dramatic lighting on that mountain, imagine that covered the entire mountain, so across the side. Mm-hmm. Think of how flat the image would then read.
Yeah.
So that's the importance of these decisions.
Yeah. No, that's why, if I were to fill all that in with the same value as that like white area, it'd flatten everything out, and you'd realize like, oh, this whole thing is basically just like a big chunky shape going across the image, and it suddenly has no sense of space. Everything's on the same plane.
Yep.
And like that, especially with this piece where I needed to get across a sense of scale, it completely defeats the purpose of it. So that's why stuff like that, where it's, it may seem like an easy trick to just like, okay, well, the things that are closer to you are a little sharper and brighter and easier to see, and the things that are farther from you or a little less so, but it's very important.
We've both made those mistakes
Yeah.
many a time. That's
Yeah.
the thing. So, the other question I had for you is there's often like the theory that artists are oftentimes more valueless or colorless. Have you heard that kind of like theory before?
Yeah, where whatever your crutch is,
kind of
sometimes.
like, or like how you like perceive the world. I guess do you have a sense of if you're more of a valuist or a colorist naturally?
I mean, I like to think that like I love me a very striking color scheme.
Yeah.
But in terms of how I actually work, I'm 100% values guy, because I've kind of learned over the years. Usually my pieces start out in black and white anyways. I do black and white just to establish the values so that everything is communicated without any color. And then I start doing different layers of overlays and everything to get across the colors and then show that to the client as an idea of like what the album will look like. Because they want to see it in color. Right. And they, there are clients that are like, yeah, I'll use my imagination and figure out what this black and white sketch will look like. But for me, since I'm digital, like I'm able to easily just like, okay, I'll take my black and white sketch and just add some quick color treatments to it just to give you an idea of what things will look like. Way more values guy. That's how I learned how to make things look more 3D, give it more depth, and also learn like how to separate chunks on whatever I was trying to portray. Really figuring out foreground, middle ground, and background is all about like values. Yep. And how they work and how sometimes they don't like they don't always work how you think they are, because like usually the rule is like whatever's closest to you. Like say if you've got like there's a person, there's a mountain, and then there's the sky. It'll usually be like, I learned this from like concept art, that like the person would be dark but super sharp up front. The middle ground would be like a middle gray, and then the background would be very light. Mm-hmm. So you get like a real good separation of everything. But that doesn't always work. So what if it's nighttime? Where's your light source? What color is the ground that they're sitting on? Is your character wearing very bright clothing? Then how are you going to communicate that if they're super dark up front in the image? So that's where you start to see how other artists have tackled it, but then also like referencing like photography and everything. See how things look like in a space.
Nighttime with local color, it's so deceptive. You think it's more red than it actually would be. It'd be so muted and like almost a gray. Like, reading a book about lighting and those kind of things, and that, I mean, I think that's probably one of the hardest things to nail. But if you do nail it, it makes the difference between great art and average or good art in a lot of cases when it comes to illustration.
Yeah, I mean, like, color's a big part of a lot of my stuff, where I really like stuff to pop. I think it's something that I think people notice a lot with my work. They notice like the saturation of the colors. Everything's can be very bright. But like I have also learned that like a splash of red is always cool, but it doesn't fix a piece. Like it can be a little distracting to maybe the places that you haven't worked out quite as well. But figuring out lighting is and coloring is very much something that's been an over the years process of like doing stuff that doesn't quite work, occasionally accidentally doing things that work.
Yep.
And then trying to find like, okay, what did I do here? I'm sure you've got pieces where like as artists, we all like grow from our past pieces. So there'll be more and more pieces from the past. I look at it like, ugh,
Oh yeah.
I don't want to even see that. But there'll be occasionally the one where I'm like, okay, I was doing something cool there. Why can't I do that now?
Oh man, bringing it back to the Mark Riddick stream, because that's exactly what we did. We went through like our past work. So man, that's very fresh in my mind.
Yeah, there's some pieces from 5 years ago where I'm like, what did I do for that? What brush was I using? Like, that came together really quick too. Why am I struggling with this piece right now? It just means, you're always growing. And sometimes even like pieces that I'm really proud of, I wasn't proud of them like all the way through. Sometimes it's like 70% of the process is hating a piece and struggling with it and not figuring out exactly how to fix it. And then in that last 30% being like, I got it. Okay, this is what I'm doing. You just wish you would have gotten there sooner.
And if you have the luxury stepping away for 2 days, that obviously helps. But you don't always have that. When you
sometimes you just got to do it. I mean, with every new project I take on, like there's ones like, I mean, even the covers that I've done so far, like I'm very proud of each of them and very, very thankful for like the work that they've gotten me. But in every single one of them, I'm like, okay, I could tweak that a little bit. Okay, I could fix that.
I'm curious for you to tell me what those are.
I don't want to.
All right, fine. You don't have to.
Yeah, it's weird because like all of them I'm super happy with, but it's just the occasional ones where like, especially once you see it printed, and I think like maybe with the Soulfly one, once I saw it on a vinyl, I was like, this is a little dark. I wish I could light it up just a little bit. But that's sometimes just like not the artist's fault and just like how it printed. Mm-hmm. Like you can't control that side of the process. But I have learned over the years that like, okay, I need to be a little bit more I have to have a wider range of values instead of being like very extreme with things. Because usually like very high contrast things or things that, it may look great on my computer display and I can see all the nuances, may not be able to see them when they print.
They get lost.
Yeah. So that's something that has been a learning process because even like me selling my own stuff, whether through cons or my shop, I've had to deal with printers where I get something back and I'm like, hey man, this doesn't look like the image that I sent you. Like I'm going to need a reprint on this. That's why, one of these days, like my next big investment is getting like a nice home printer in which I can really control all the colors and everything. That's expensive though. It takes up a lot of space. So.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I'm about to move to a new house and think I got to look at the prices, but I want a scanner that's bigger than just like, 8.5 by 11.
Oh yeah.
That'll help out a lot. So I need to look at what options those are, but that's something I'm willing to invest in.
Oh yeah. Like, especially like some of the bigger stuff of yours, like, are you going as big as like poster size, like 18 by 24 potentially? Yeah. So you're going to want something that can scan that.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I need to find the time and get that all going. But even just having my own prints and stuff, I don't even have that yet. I think a lot of it's just, I want to have 6, 7 pieces that I'm like, no, this is me. And I feel comfortable printing these. And I feel like I'm getting close to that. But for a long time, I think I was just being like, I'm good for a hobbyist, but making that plunge and getting a little farther in, it takes time. It takes a lot of self-awareness too. So I'm getting closer.
No, yeah, and your stuff is great, man. But I can also see like, that stuff takes time.
Yeah.
and especially if you've got it like a day job, like that free time is very precious. So like it's kind of like, okay, do I want to invest that free time in a piece that I know is going to be something that will bring me more work in the future that I'm really happy with, or is it going to be something that like I'm just doing just to do? But then I'm sure you occasionally have those days where it's like, well, I just got off of work. Last thing I want to do is go work some more. But I think as artists, like it really shows how much you love doing it. Where like sometimes it's no matter how much work you've done all day, you want to get that idea out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Have you ever worked on a piece all day and then to take a break from it, you start another piece?
Oh yeah, I always have things at different stages. So
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you're the same way. I have two rough sketches that are pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
I have a piece. I think I might actually pull it out because hope you're cool with it.
Do it.
When we pull up your DK shirt design.
Yeah.
Your shirt design was on my mood board for a reference. It's my end of piece looks very different, but you'll see some of the similarities.
Let me see it. I'm flattered. Yeah.
I'll show we're up. It's more of the composition and the framing, and I bet we're both drawing from similar things anyways.
Oh yeah. Like I'm constantly like, I've got a full Pinterest board of like, just, okay, here are color schemes I like. Here are like armor styles that I like. Here are, like artists who have done like I don't do a lot of backgrounds in my pieces, or at least not fully developed backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I like to sometimes save like, okay, how have these artists figured out how to put information back there? Because oftentimes like I would love to just do a character and not have to think about the background, but
yeah,
you got to do something back there sometimes. So we're all pulling from something.
Yeah.
Like we can't, none of us are just like out of nowhere coming up with great ideas. Or, you got to have
not
inspiration.
fully realized, at least, or not as good as they could be.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
The one thing this is advice that I got from like Jeremy Watts. He owns the Watts Atelier out of California, and he's worked in concept artists. He's helped out that next generation, as with a lot of good art schools. But something that he said, and I've never even met the guy, but he just has made a really big impression on me with any interviews he's had online, and a lot of his voices kind of stick in my head. But I do think that some artists spend too much time focused so much on the social media and the business when they really should just take a lot of that time to spend more on their craft personally. Mm-hmm. So like me being like, if I would rather spend time getting really damn good than just build a social media audience and build this business prematurely. I feel like I'm getting closer to that point of like, I need to spend more time on that stuff. But, I'm not thinking about anybody individually. I just think that's a common trap is people putting way too much interest in like just their presence when their work really could go a lot farther.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've kind of seen that like over the years but in different forms. Like I don't do as much these days, but I used to do a lot more conventions. And through doing a good amount of conventions, you start to see like the different kinds and levels of artists that show up and are trying to sell stuff. And obviously it depends on the convention that you're selling, and you got to know your audience. But I'll see like, up and coming artists who are figuring stuff out, which is fine. We all go through that process, and we're all kind of always going through that process. It's just,
There's a tipping point though.
Yeah. So like there'll be some young artists where I'll see their stuff, and that they may be doing everything right social media wise, which is great, and you that needs to be a thing if you're going to have a presence online like that. You got to be out there, and you got to be using it regularly. Like that's just we're all fighting the algorithm monster, so it's just something we have to accept. But there is a lot to be said about are you showing your skills off in a way that's flattering? Are you showing your best work? Like I talked to local high school recently and kind of was telling them that right now you guys are going through a process of like trying everything out because you're just sponges at this point. You're learning. But at a certain point on your portfolio, you're going to have to weed out certain stuff. Clients don't want to, if they're looking for your work, they want to see your best stuff, because if you show them your best stuff mixed with your not so best stuff, they're going to start to worry about like, okay, am I getting this artist or am I getting this artist, depending on the skill set. And I think that sometimes forces you to realize like, oh, there's stuff I need to work on. And that's really important. Especially having like peers and friends, roommates, girlfriends, anything like that. You need to have that person who's able to talk with you honestly about something. So where you got to be willing to show somebody like, hey, I'm working on this. What do you think? And that they're not just going to be like, oh, it's great, I love it. Like, okay, well, thank you. But what you're really looking for is somebody to tell you like, that sticks out to me. That sticks out to me, whether good or bad. And that's why I very much appreciate having a partner that's also like artistically inclined. So I can trust her to look at it and be like, okay, how's everything looking? Is everything communicating? And they know that you're not just looking for compliments. What you're really looking for is like, okay, is something not working with this? And I appreciate brutal honesty, because I'd much rather hear what's not working than what's working. So like that's very important, being able to have a group of people around that can help you improve. Because I don't want to be told all my stuff is great. I want to hear like, oh, that's that. Oh, I didn't see that, or that you didn't communicate that well enough, or maybe that those proportions are off, or that your lighting is not translating, or it all sorts of different problems that I've got my own insecurities about, like certain things that I can and can't do.
Yeah.
So in order for me to improve, I need to hear from other people like, nah, this is good, that needs work. So I think that's super important, especially if you're an upcoming artist. Make friends with the local art community, or say if you are going to a convention and you're meeting people that you really look up to, some of them are totally down to look at portfolios, and some of them encourage portfolio reviews. Even art directors online, they may offer critiques to where your art buddies might think that you're doing great stuff, but as soon as you show it to an art director, they might be like, hey, cool stuff, but we're not as crazy about this stuff. Or even it could be on the technical side where like your website needs work. We're not able to clearly navigate your website, or we couldn't find out how to email you. That sort of stuff's really important because
Yeah.
I've seen art directors say, like, if it takes me more than 3 clicks to get to your site and look through stuff, I'm not even going to bother. So it's good to hear that, like, tough love goes a long ways, but it is love. But the toughness is really what helps you grow.
Yeah, it's very true. And sometimes I find myself like perfectly in the right mood to like accept feedback. Sometimes like I'm feeling a little vulnerable right now. I try to get out of my head, but you're completely right. And sometimes you might not want to hear it, but it's what you need to hear.
Oh yeah, I mean I've definitely had clients say they don't like a thing that I liked, and sometimes I disagree with them, and you just have to roll with it. And sometimes them bringing up that point will make me realize what's wrong. Yeah. Because as artists, we're looking at a piece, it's right here, and we kind of get lost in it after a while. So sometimes like you almost don't see the piece. You just, it's almost like just like a blur that you've been working on after a while.
Totally.
But people coming into it new will notice everything. And sometimes it takes somebody from the outside being like, hey, what's this doing over here? It's not quite right, for me to be like, oh crap, okay, let me go fix that. Or maybe I'll forget a detail that they wanted earlier on because I got too distracted by all the other stuff I was working on the piece. Like, oh, hey, we wanted 3 bats in this picture, but you only were showing 1. Like, oh crap, yeah. Now I have to change the composition a little bit. Okay.
Or like you're doing something and you're thinking about all the fundamentals naturally, but then it's like, hey, but that actually doesn't make any sense. Why is that figure doing that with that? It's like, I guess it just looked good, but yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Why would that person be grinning or something? I don't know. I'm just thinking arbitrarily, but like I can get so caught up in the feeling of the image or whatever that I like forget like, oh, that actually doesn't really make sense.
And sometimes that's okay. Like, sometimes a piece just like looking cool is fine. But I think it's always like, does the image make sense within the rules that you've given it? So if you're doing a piece, say like Brad Moore is a good example. Yeah. A lot of his pieces, like you look at the is it the Spinebreaker cover that he did recently?
The recent one, yeah.
Yeah,
in the center.
Amazing cover. But a lot of it is very abstract looking, like cavernous things and different creatures crawling around it, but it's hard to like literally describe. But within its own world, it works. It looks like everything that is in that aesthetic works by his painting's rules. Whereas like if I were try to put like in that landscape a very literal, I don't know, like
a monster truck.
A monster truck. Yeah. A very photoreal monster truck. It'd be like, why the hell is this monster truck in this piece? It doesn't make any sense. So it's all about like what works within the context that you've given the piece, because like say the red wolf that's behind us, that's very much something that I just thought was a really striking image, and I just thought would look cool, and I think works as a piece. But like if I started to think about it a little bit more, like, okay, it looks like the creature's coming out of the red liquid. Wouldn't the rest of it be covered in red? Because it was maybe implying it was previously submerged. But then I tried that and I was like, well, then it doesn't stand out from the background at all, and I'm losing the wolf face. I'm like, well, it doesn't literally have to be like a, it doesn't have to dye its fur. It doesn't have to be literal blood. It just has to make sense for what looks cool.
Yeah.
So And that's just about selling the image more than selling like any sort of like real life logic to it. Like it's same goes for movies or whatever. Like, if the kind of rules that are taking place in like a comic book movie that's supposed to be super exaggerated and fun do not work the same for, Saving Private Ryan. And two completely different things that they're trying to get across. So it's a matter of things working within the context that you give the viewers. And even with the Soulfly piece next to it is about like, okay, we've got that main source of light underneath the totem. Mm-hmm. Would the woods literally be lit like that all around? Would the wood totem behind it's like, wouldn't it be a lot more orange, or like wouldn't you be able to see a lot less if you were actually there in the woods, or if you took a picture of it? Like, yeah, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to do a heightened reality that this all works within.
Yeah.
If I were trying to be photoreal,
definitely based on realism though, in that one.
Yeah.
Like you like it definitely all reads like perfectly right.
Yeah, and I think that was more through like, okay, we've got a totem with different carved out shapes. I have to make sure the lighting hits these surfaces in the correct way, so that it sells what it is to the viewer. That it is a totem with all these different inlays and carved out pieces to it, and you can see it through the lighting. And that also helped later on when they did a music video for it. A 3D artist had to render it.
Oh, really?
So they reached out to me. They were like, "Hey, thanks for making that piece like easy to copy. Like it's very detailed, but it kind of gave me everything I needed to make a model for it." So that was so cool to see. First time seeing like my own artwork put into 3D. So that was amazing.
Yeah, with that piece in particular, the Soulfly one, the lighting you did on the brow of the kind of middle creature, what I'm talking about? Like that's very well done because it has the menacing vibe, but then obviously the lighting's realistic, and that would be like an easy like I think I would maybe make the mistake at first of like not making that dark enough, and then you lose the 3D form of the brow. Just it's little art nerdery stuff that I just think you really nailed on that one. And then the translucency of the creatures is super cool.
That was the hardest part because initially we didn't have the creatures in there, and I wanted it to be more of a blank forest. But then we realized that it was very blank. Like there's only this single thing in the middle. We need to flesh it out a little bit more. But once we added them, it added way more to the mystery of the piece, and it played more with the different lyrics that were on the album as well. But also figuring out how to make like spirits look ghostly, but not like, but they're not emitting light really, but they are also like blending in with the forest a little bit. So that was a case where like I think it looks great on the computer, but once it printed out, especially on the CD, came out really dark.
Oh yeah.
But that's it's not up to me. But it's something that I learned later on. Like, okay, maybe that's something that I work on if somebody asked me to do a very dark piece again, to where like consider the fact that this is going to be printed. And those very dark values are all going to be kind of like crushed and melded into each other when it's printed like this big. So those bright areas really need to stick out if you want them to be seen. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have them as not spirits in like the literal animals, or spirits from the get-go?
They were spirits from the get-go. Like the most literal thing we wanted was the totem. Mm-hmm. And to be, or at least the physical presence of the totem, and the idea of spirit animals was there from the beginning, where like somehow having that as a theme or a little like showing of the spirit animal to be on there. So I think that helped out, and it was fun like doing all the inside stuff too, because that was all like ink and everything, like super different than all this, but it all looks like it was all painted on old dyed and stained paper. So I got to do those animals again, but in a very different style.
Did you always have the sky showing at the top, or did you ever have the trees going all the way to the top?
I had the trees going all the way up initially, and I think it was a wide decision to show a little bit of sky because it helped break it up a little bit. I think it helped lead the eye a little bit to have that sort of shape coming down into the head of the owl on top.
Yeah, you see a little bit of lighting on the tips of the wings too, so then it doesn't be dark on dark. There's just a little of that sliver that breaks it up.
Yeah, we needed to separate it a little bit. And another thing that like doing record covers that I started to learn more is that you got to leave space for the logo and the title. Like it's, even though like it may not compositionally be like your favorite version of the piece, you need to have that blank space there. And you need to, another thing I learned is that like bands want their logos big and much bigger than you want them to be. you want your art to be this and the logo to be this, because you want to show off everything.
Yeah.
But you have to consider the fact that the bands, they and you know, rightly so, they want people to be able to see that logo from a ways away. So that was something where like I felt like the totem was probably another, like the wings probably
figuring out the height and all that. I could see that as being a tricky problem.
Yeah, where I had to smush it in some areas, but that was like earlier. That was like probably halfway through where I realized like, okay, they want the sky, we want the tree line. That's where I put the logo. But how much room do they need? And also, I didn't quite know. Like, I didn't do the totem font or anything, so I had to leave room for them to either put it in between the logo and the totem itself, or at the bottom in the flames and everything. I thought they were going to put it there.
You got the light source though, so that presents kind of a problem too, because you have like a dark on the light.
Well, I thought they were maybe going to do that, but I'm glad they went with what they did, because like that stands out amongst the darker values, and it doesn't interrupt any of that art on the bottom. So it's just how it happens sometimes. You give the art and you tell them like what you think would look best, but sometimes, you know, ultimately it is their piece, and they might make changes to it afterwards, just to, you know, make it work exactly how they need for packaging purposes and everything. And that'll happen sometimes with like, you know, putting things on cassettes can sometimes be a little tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Because like fitting it all on that. But luckily, with the totem artwork, like it worked great for a cassette. Because it's
blow you up real quick.
Yeah. So with that is like, it's a vertical piece.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect for this. And then they also did long boxes for it too, because I think part of that, because Municipal Waste did it too. And I think they were saying like, because around that time there was like a big vinyl shortage, but they still wanted to be able to move units. So some of these bands were like, okay, let's do long boxes. I know that's kind of like a more retro thing, but
Immolation did it. I think it was a Nuclear Blast thing then. It must have been.
It might have been, yeah, because Municipal Waste did it too with theirs.
That looks pretty sick.
Yeah, and they got the Reaper art on the back too. So like it worked out, because like their vinyl didn't come until like months later after the record release, but they wanted to make sure, you know, they could move some stuff. So, and you know, that we all have a Taylor Swift and a Adele to blame for all that, because they just ate up all the vinyl. And so any band smaller than them, which is, every band, had to just kind of wait on their vinyl releases for a while.
I remember that. I think we're still feeling a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, the funny thing is like now there's like, you'll see at your local Goodwill probably a pile of Adele vinyls or something, or just in any store that sells them, is just like a huge rack of them, because they probably bought way too much, or the actual places that sell the vinyl bought a ton thinking that people would get them, but that fan base might not be the type that wants that big physical release. Whereas you get, metal fans or fans who are into a more niche genre, they want to buy that special thing because they know that there's not going to be a million copies made of it.
Yeah.
We've probably all had an experience where we regret not buying a vinyl like when it came out, and then like years later thinking like, oh, I'd love to have that, and then it's like $300 wherever you want to like get a copy because they haven't repressed it or something.
I feel you there. And it's always fun finding those hidden gems.
Yeah, because I always keep my eye out in local record shops, but so sometimes I'll just wait for a band to repress, because I don't have like a personal attachment to getting like first pressings or anything. Like, they're nice to find, but I'm not about to spend an arm and a leg on it. I just like cool packaging, and I like supporting the artists getting the like premium version of the product. And then now doing art for these bands, like, it just looks so good on that 12 by 12 format, and it's so satisfying, like going into a record store, holding it, grabbing it, and like putting it on display.
I did this.
Yes, look what I did. See? And then everybody, collectively.
One like high fidelity flex moment at the counter. Like, I don't know if you know me.
That was me. Like, sir, I don't care. I don't like that. Yeah, but
Swift vinyl, I'll give it to you for $5 extra.
Yeah. But it's just there isn't something that's been like one of the most satisfying parts of it. Like, of course, this is it's all a job. You pay the bills, everything. But there's that lasting bit of it where that like, I just like being part of the community, and like having these pieces of art, the record, the actual music, and then my illustrations, like, as a thing that's contributing to the ongoing metal community. I just love being a part of that. The coolest thing is like going to a show and seeing people like wear a shirt you designed, or somebody recognize your work from somewhere. A recent thing has been a client I was talking to. They're like, yeah, I want to get me a Bousema piece. And I'm like, that's just my name, man. But like, when I think about it, like I think of other artists that way, where I just call them by their last name. Like, oh, that's a this piece. That's a this piece. So hearing that was, it's another imposter syndrome moment where you're like, nah, you're just saying that to be nice. But no, they mean it. And you just have to accept that, like, oh man, okay. I've now got something that I have to like live up to. So that's the other thing. I guess
it makes sense that you have imposter syndrome now. I mean, you got a great career ahead of you, dude. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
I hope so, man. That's my thing. I want some longevity in this. You're
too versatile to slow down, in my opinion. Like, dude, if you need any boost of confidence, you're freaking killing it.
I appreciate it, man. I'm just like, I'm trying to enjoy all of it more than anything, because I just always have like a cynical bit in the back of my head that's like, okay, this is the last one. and and then nobody wants your stuff anymore. It's that's not a real way to look at it, but there's always going to be that doubt there. And I think that keeps me like hungry and keeps me with a good work ethic. It is inspired by fear of some kind.
Humble and approachable too. Like clearly you don't have like a huge ego, which is great.
Yeah, I think my thing is just like, I'm just happy to be here. So every new job I get, I'm just like, thank you very much, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm sure some clients are like, hey, nope. I mean, that's what we hired you for. Like, it's no big deal. Like, but I every bit of it, I'm just super thankful for it, because I just think of myself like a couple years ago and think like, okay, tell that person the kind of stuff that you're working on now, and they'd probably be very happy for it. So anytime that I start to feel a little overworked or feel a little like drained and maybe not as grateful as I should be, I try to always remind myself of that, and
keeps you centered.
Yeah. You gotta be realistic about the things that are going well, but then I'll always have that back of the head, like, well, what if they didn't go well? It's like, keep going.
Oh man. What was I gonna say? Let's just talk about these pieces right in front of us. So
sure.
Two very different pieces here. And I'm trying to remember, you said Municipal Waste you did first.
That was the
why
first.
Don't we start with that one? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, so that was probably mid 2020 that I noticed. I think Tony from Municipal Waste followed my stuff first. I'm not sure how he found it, but 2020 I was doing all sorts of like hashtags around everywhere to like try to get my stuff in front of different eyes, and I was also doing more original stuff, which I think was starting to develop my style in a way that I think caught people's eyes more. Because I was already starting to build like a following in like 2018 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So 2020 just made it really hard to like actually ride off of that and propel it, because it just things weren't happening. But I think they noticed my stuff from somewhere, and and I also knew a person that I had kept up with over the years from Nuclear Blast. I think I met them at a convention, and they had told me like, "Hey, you ever do metal covers?" I'm like, "No, but I'd love to." I've just been a fan of the community forever, and I obviously like, this is stuff that I would love to do, but just never quite got the opportunity to do it.
You need any water or anything, man? You can.
Yeah, actually, do you mind pausing? Like, you can maybe edit right here. I can maybe go get like a cough drop and some more water.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Okay, let me do that real quick. Yeah, that's the thing with this Vegas weather. It just dries your throat out like super easy.
I've only been in once, but yeah, I felt exactly that way. My skin was dry as shit.
Oh, yeah. No, I have to remind myself. Even though I'm used to it, it's still rough.
Municipal Waste.
Oh, yeah. Municipal Waste, they contacted me 2020, and we, like, because of how everything was, we had plenty of time to really iron things out. And this was definitely a case of me, like, wanting to prove myself. Because I knew that, this is Nuclear Blast, major label. I was already a fan of Municipal Waste, and I kind of knew their whole approach to things in terms of the art, which is usually like a lot more fun and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but still very metal. So this was a case where me and Ryan mostly ironed out the concept, and it was through a mix of figuring out our different inspirations, the kind of aesthetic that he wanted to get across, which was very 80s, very old school illustrated cover with a very striking image that you could pretty much see across the room. Because they had done a couple pieces where like it was, a big background piece with a bunch of different characters in it, lots of stuff going on, and they wanted to like simplify this as like a singular striking image.
Like, iconic.
Yeah. And it was also like, I think their first album in like 5 years. So it was a little bit of like, okay, we're back. Here's us again. And so that was a fun mixture of figuring out this image was very much like we had it early on, but it was all about how to sell it the most. Also, that's probably my first time drawing a very detailed guitar. So Ryan gave me a lot of his photos from different angles of the guitar to figure out how everything looks. Like I play guitar for a long time, so I know where everything is, but it's not until you have to draw it that you realize like how many different things are on a guitar.
Is that his guitar then?
Yes. Yeah. And he sent me tons of reference photos for it, so I just had to figure out how it would look at that angle, how it would split. Also, like the entry points and exit points of it and how it would fit within the composition. So there's some places where like the guitar is like a little smaller than it needs to be, just because like it needs to fit. And then other places where it's a little bit more exaggerated, just because it needs to come out at a right spot. But when you just look at it by itself, it all looks the same size. It's like doing these little tricks just to make the image work that you won't really notice unless you're the artist actually making it. And it was just a mix of like figuring out, okay, more bloody chunks, more electricity, less electricity. Okay.
Or what's skull and what's flesh. And that's a interesting.
Yeah, because they didn't want him to be like a zombie, but they also didn't want him to look like he disliked getting his head exploded. Nice. It's very celebratory almost. Like it's fun in nature. It's very much the energy of like a Return of the Living Dead, whereas like a fun skeleton / guy getting blown up. And
little eyes shooting out. I just noticed that.
Very playful. So that was a lot of fun, especially since the way I was approaching it and the closer you get with the details, it's more from it's more of an approach that almost looks airbrushed. But like
that's what I was about to say. Yes.
Like, and that was just a matter of me using a digital brush that had that texture on it, where it had a little bit of splatter and those kind of more dotted
buzz to it.
Yeah, everything a little fuzzy, and that also helped it look the way that they wanted, because they were referencing, Scorpions and Iron Maiden artwork and all that.
Blackout sticks out to me.
Yeah. So it's very much playing into cliches, but still being a Municipal Waste thing. And you kind of have to do that with any of these. Like that's why I enjoy having like a wide variety of clients, because everybody doesn't just want a Municipal Waste cover, and that keeps things super interesting for me. I mean, it definitely got me a lot of work. I've definitely had a lot of like thrash bands see that and be like, oh man, can we get some? And some of them I end up working with. Others, it's like, they'll message me for work. I'll be like, okay, here are my rates. And they'll be like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's that just happens.
It is.
But once it was finished, And then we figured out the whole back of the artwork, which was the Reaper turning up the amps, and then like the whole like Marshall stack exploding.
Do you mind showing that, since you had that long box right there?
Yeah, I've got the long, but I've also got the 12-inch.
Yeah.
Right here, in which like he's got like turning up the knobs, got everything exploding over here. And initially we were gonna have like the front cable. It had the whole band sign it when they came here recently.
Oh, you just got to flex that a little bit. Oh,
yeah,
don't mind me.
No, I wanted them to sign everything. I had my own copy, but I wanted one for this. But we initially wanted the cable to go from the guitar and then wrap around exactly to like a stack right here. But we couldn't figure out the sizing quite right, because if you 1-to-1 size the cable going into the amp's just like too big and it takes up the whole image. So we eventually more implied it more than anything, and it ended up being like a separate illustration, but one that still connects to the energy of the one on the front. And it made for like two really cool pieces. Like this whole back piece is probably like one of my favorite things I've ever done. And
that looks like it'd have different challenges, like the kind of side perspective. Definitely.
Yeah.
Right.
And I always hate painting geometrical things.
Yep.
I hate things with straight edges because now I have to figure out perspective.
Yep.
So that took a little bit to figure out, but it became a lot easier once I had to just blow everything up. that made it easier.
That,
Yeah, just like I can't figure this spot out. Put fire right there. It looks cool.
Yeah. Now this Death Western piece, I'll have you talk first. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I mean that was one where I believe the Spiritworld guys were touring with Municipal Waste on the Decibel tour in I want to say at the end of 2021, something like that. It's now becoming a little bit of a blur exactly when I did these pieces, because it's like kind of in pandemic, kind of coming out of it. But I believe they probably figured out my work through meeting the Municipal Waste guys on that tour, and I discovered them because I did a shirt design for that Decibel tour. So I followed them and then realized, oh, these guys are local. They're a Vegas band. And
sound wise.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy with how everything came out. It sounds great. And Stu, the main guy in it, reached out to me, and he had he's got like a whole concept for everything. He's really got like a big story around all these things. And he really wanted I think on a lot of the record, it's mostly Vegas artists and producers and everything that worked on it, and photographers and everything. And so that was really cool that he was adamant about that, especially like them coming off of Pagan Rhythms, which was kind of like a smaller release, and then got picked up by a Century Media. And he came to me and he saw some of my stuff, saw how I was kind of like, that's when I was starting to do some stuff that had more of the retro look to it. It looked very textured, very, very much like an old school 70s, 80s horror and fantasy novel stuff, which is kind of like where my sweet spot is nowadays. Yeah. And he saw all that stuff and he's like, hey, I want something that kind of looks in that era, but like a horror spaghetti Western, like very pulpy. And that's what we went with. This is very much inspired by, we looked at a lot of old pulp novels and spaghetti Western posters, all illustrated, very bright colors, and also with multiple different story elements happening all at once, as you would see on like a movie poster.
Yep.
And that became a new challenge because I wasn't quite as used to doing that sort of stuff. And I realized just that's a completely different skill set, doing stacked poster art. You see like the floating heads very often.
Drusen stuff,
Yeah.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I would look at a lot of that sort of stuff and see like, okay, how does he balance all these things going on at once? And it's a lot harder than it looks, because you think like, oh, okay, well, you have like, the smaller stuff at the bottom, you get the bigger stuff up here, and you have some different story elements here and there that pop in, but you start to do it and lay it out and realize that like, oh man, this can visually get to be a mess very easily if you don't separate your elements and don't try to balance things in a good way. So this was very much a learning experience type cover, but now that it's like done, it's out, and it's gotten a very positive response. I think it brings a lot of new people that see that cover like, okay, what is this? It like you don't immediately think like, oh, this is a metallic hardcore band. You think this is like a soundtrack.
They're definitely a surprise kind of band,
Yeah.
They're going for that shock that first time you hear them or see them. They have that. Yeah. They all wear the outfits and everything.
Yeah, and they're playing more and more into that. Like the bigger they get, and I think they just on this last tour that they're on with Kreator and Sepultura, they've now got a full backdrop of that art. And it works so well with their outfits, and now they've like decorated their amps a little bit, and they're just like going all in on the aesthetic, which is great. It's a really fun one to play around with, because I'm a big fan of stuff like Red Dead Redemption, like old like horror westerns. I think are a lot of fun, and I always like enjoy that era of art, that kind of 70s kind of grungier era of things. And it came together. We had a couple different versions of this, but early on we pretty much established almost this exact composition, and it is very much is close to these colors, which is very simplified, like super chunky and messy on a iPad real quick, but it was enough to get across what they wanted. And I think that the only thing we really like changed, not really changed, but like the Death Western title wasn't like, I didn't design that or place that there. I mainly left room for the Spiritworld on the top left, and had the rest of the illustration done, and they were going to figure out where to put the title of the record. So sometimes I do design the titles and stuff, and then sometimes that's just up to their own designer that the label has or the band knows. Because as much as I do some graphic design in some of my stuff, I prefer illustration over everything. So I'm cool to let that off to a designer if they need to, because a lot of the inside layout and like the tracks on the back and everything, sometimes I do that, but oftentimes I don't. But it's always with that in mind. You got to leave space for it. You got to, like on the Spiritworld one, got it right here with the back. It's got this big mesa on the back. So I knew that I needed to have like something for the text to contrast against. And so like this big block in the middle really helped just like give them a good amount of space so that they can
that's
clear.
Really smart.
And it just ended up being a cool illustration by itself that they can use for whatever they want. But yeah, it's a different way of thinking about things, where like it's not just an illustration. It's actually like a delivery vehicle for track information. So it needs to work like that.
Yeah. It's definitely a very ambitious piece, and you're talking about some of the problems you had to solve. I could totally see them. I feel like I would second guess myself a lot with the decisions on this one, because you kind of have to go more off of feeling, because they're separate yet together. So man, you did a great job. Like, excellent. I feel like this one would be a very challenging one. Whereas the municipal waste, you could go a little more off your gut and the iconic image. But
yeah, because it's one thing.
Yeah,
it'd be like if the Spiritworld cover was just a red background, and then I just had to do the
if you just had the cowboy, or
just the cowboy.
Yeah.
So like it's a lot easier to just purely focus on that. But I've learned a lot about doing layouts and balancing different characters since this piece, because I realized how much I didn't know, and how much I liked the idea of doing a poster like this, but I hadn't tackled it full on. So that it was cool. Like it becomes frustrating, because like, oh, if I get this right, this can be a really cool piece.
Mm-hmm.
But in the process of doing it, you have to
It's a
figure
puzzle.
out. Yeah, you got to figure like how it's working, how it isn't. For a while we had the cactuses in the back, and they were just regular cactuses, so they were like a dark green or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that they were just like, man, they're not connecting with the rest of the piece, or they feel off. They just feel like they're just there because there needs to be cactuses in the West. And then I showed him, like, what if we use this fire element that we've got from this witch in the front and pull it across, and then it's setting off the cactuses on fire, and that kind of connects it, and I can make them red to kind of mix in with everything nicely. And
that's a nice aha moment right there.
It felt like an aha moment, so where like, okay, here's how I can connect these pieces that are separate and just not working for me right now. But yeah, that's just part of a lot of this stuff is just problem solving. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I fix this visual problem? Why isn't it working? This was a lot of that, but I'm real happy with how it came out. I think it looks real good, big behind them. I don't know when the next time they're coming to Vegas, but I'm looking forward to the next show, because they keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about that. So let's talk a little bit about these two.
Yeah, the shirt designs. And I'm now realizing both with just a big circle in the middle. Nothing like a good circle to help, like, just
that's what I'm going to show you where easier. I got my inspiration from. So
yes,
obviously you didn't invent the circle, but I did use your DK design as inspiration. Yeah,
I'm telling you, like, so many, like, a lot of the artwork that I really like that really inspired me is that kind of 70s, 80s fantasy stuff.
Yep.
And in a lot of those, there's just a moon in the background, somewhere, just to frame things nicely, or just fill up some space. Like Frazetta does that a lot, where there's just a planet there, or there's this blank space over here, put a couple birds there flying off in the distance. Not because there's any like reason for them to be there, but it just adds something. Mm-hmm. And with these two pieces, I mean, Daniel DK, like, he's a great guy. He's like one of the first guys in the metal scene that brought me on to do some work with him. Yeah, shouts out to him, like, because he really promoted my stuff before things started blowing up, and gave me a chance to work with him on a different design than this, but also just kind of like we had gotten to know each other. Like, he had come to Vegas for a show or two, we got to become friends, and real cool guy. And this is a recent design I did for him, and it was very much inspired by old fantasy artwork. I look at a lot of like paperback covers from that era. That font, Yeah, like that's a font where like I'll take like two different kinds of fonts, mesh the parts that I like the most, and then customize it to be its own thing. Where it like works around the piece so everything feels very natural. And then that's one where I worked with it initially all in one color, but then he wanted some green hits, and that really sold the piece, and it helped like separate some of the elements too.
For sure.
And that's one where going into it, the previous piece that I did for him is much more painterly, and we kind of found that like that printed a little bit more difficult on the shirt. But with this, it's going to print like super easy because everything's very separated. Yeah, it's very, very hard edged. A lot of the line work and everything. Nothing's like super blended. It's basically made as if it was like a piece of comic book art, where it's just black and white. So that's another thing I had to consider with some clients. If I'm doing a T-shirt or if I'm doing a screen print, which I occasionally do every now and then, where you're limited on colors and you know that the separator needs to, you got to help them out a little bit. Sometimes clients will be like, just you do what you want and we'll figure out the separating later. That's what happened with the pull the plug patches piece, where they were just like, you do you, and we'll separate the colors however we need, because this is going to be like a 1 million color print. So like we'd rather you just paint however you want, and then we'll take care of the other end of things. I can't imagine what it was like to separate this piece, because I just look at, especially just all the different patches on the vest, where they're all sorts of different colors. Like there's only like green in one spot on there, so they got to have another hit just for the greens. It's a lot, but it was a lot of fun developing that design, especially since it was already established by Dan, who's done plenty of did the design for Patchy, this character.
Dan Goldsworthy?
Yeah. And he's a metal artist himself, has done tons of great covers. I'm going
to be talking with him soon.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Really nice guy.
Yeah. We talk every now and then, and he established this design for Patchy, but then I like added the giant plug hands. They're a little silly.
You went all He-Man with it,
Yeah. Like it was very, they know what tone they're going for, so it's very playful. And I wanted to make sure it still fit with what the work that Dan did already, so that they have like a cohesive design in their merch. And I think I've just been getting more commissions for stuff with lightning and fire. After the Spiritworld and Municipal Waste covers, everybody wants lightning and fire, which is fun for me because they are great. They're so much fun to paint, because they're not like, it's not like having to draw like a face, where it's like, okay, this has to look this way or else it looks weird. It's like, no, this is all you get to be a little bit more abstract with everything, and it's all about like the flow and movement of it more than proportions or anything like that.
Oh, I love both these designs. Here, if you want to see, let me show you this thing that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, let me see, man.
I don't think the client's going to mind. I'm pretty confident in that. So, in progress, traditional inking. But see that I kind of framed it.
Yeah, but that's great though. Like that's the stuff that I wish I could do, because like I do occasional.
There's a sloppy color mock-up.
Oh, dude, that's gonna look awesome though.
I'm actually probably gonna be doing it black and white. I just did the colors because I got bored, but I need to make sure that I have some depth here with this background. But
So did you scan it and then like print it out and do colors on top of that, or did you do a whole nother piece?
so I retraced it on, because this is on sketchbook paper and it's pretty rough. And then this is on Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
And
No,
I was like, yeah, I could have probably gone with that, but I like a lot of precision with what I'm doing, and I got a little sloppy on that first drawing.
No, I think make it look awesome in the black and white version, and then after that, maybe that's where you play with some digital options or something.
Yeah.
Where even just like, I feel like it's just great for testing things out. Like, oh, what if this color looked like this? And then you try it out, like, oh, it doesn't look good. I'm glad I didn't paint that color on there. But that's looking awesome, man. And it totally looks like your own thing. Like I wouldn't even think about like my own.
Yeah, that's why I was like, it's not even close to plagiarism. But you can see the way that you curled that dragon around the frame. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I was like, well, I'm going to have this condor vulture kind of break the frame a little too. So that's where I was getting some of those like problem solving ideas from that design.
Yeah, where you need to like figure out interesting ways to complement the shapes.
Yeah.
And bring the design, because with the way that it's shaped, it's also pointing down into the other figures in the painting or in the piece. So you're getting an overall composition that helps like accentuate itself instead of being just like this chunk over here, this chunk over here. So no, that's looking great, man. I'm looking forward to see the final piece. Do you have like a due date on it?
Not really, because the client's already kind of like behind on. Basically, there's a Riddick design that they're looking to print soon, so then mine's right after. And that was kind of part of the joke. Is I was talking with Mark, and I was like, dude, I got to follow in your footsteps. So I'm putting extra time here because I'm like, all right, well, let's go toe to toe in a fun way, of course. I'm friends with him, but
that's
he
awesome,
set the standard, though.
Yeah, no, and part of like being in this industry is definitely like living up to past art.
Yeah.
And like I've done that for.
Way to do it with Dan, with the sake of Patchy here.
Yeah. And with, like Municipal Waste, I've had plenty of awesome artists doing their covers, and, Frozen Soul, same. And it's very much been an exercise in like living up to their expectations and fan expectations. So there is a certain amount of quality matching that you have to do. Even though it's your own style, it doesn't mean you're doing other people's stuff, but it does mean that like, hey, we expect a certain amount when we commission you. So time to step up. And it looks like you're doing it, man. That piece looks awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think it'll, and that's the thing is I kind of go slow because I basically did the piece twice. But I learn a lot, and now I'm like, okay, if I made any mistakes, I can try to avoid them the second go around. So it helps me be a lot more at peace.
That's something that I'm kind of jealous of, because with all these pieces that I've done over the last couple of years, I don't have, physical versions of them. There's not some like original painting that I can hold and be like look at this piece, and like, or even for the band to have. Like sometimes I feel a little bad that I can't give them a piece to go home with, but that's just how things are with working digital. Yeah, I'd love to have a physical piece of all of these, but I also couldn't have done them physically. Like I love acrylics and colored pencils and stuff, but I can't match the quality just yet of my digital stuff because of the ability to edit. So that's maybe something that I'm looking to do in the next year or so, is like when I do have free time, try to work on more original, traditional work for myself and for my own skill development, but also because like I would like to offer like people who are potentially interested in pieces, physical things, whether they want to just license them or they're like a collector and they want something from me and they don't want to commission a digital piece.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to do that a lot easier. So that's kind of a goal of mine after working digitally for so long. It'd be nice to get back into the paints.
Yeah, I think you'd find it therapeutic and then sometimes frustrating.
Oh yeah,
one or the other.
Yep. I remember all the problems that came with it. Especially, I would buy the cheap crap too,
Oh,
and then
really?
regret it later with colors just being terrible and and things not blending right, and brushes just constantly breaking and getting hairs into my painting because I spent like $3 on them. So.
Oh yeah, man! You got to get the Winsor Newtons, man. You got to go high end.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
All right, we got some different types of commercial pieces, and I'm very interested in like the backstory in creating these.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders were another thing that happened in 2020, where here in Vegas, so Vegas has never had a football team, but it was maybe 2018, 2019 where we got the Raiders. And around then was when they started plans for the stadium, the Allegiant Stadium. And in 2020, it got finished. Of course, like nobody could really go to games or anything. But like that's when it was, that's not really far out from where I live. So all the time I could see the gradual process of the stadium being built.
That's cool.
And once it was getting close to done, they were now looking for artists to actually fill up the stadium with work. And luckily, one of the guys who was behind the art department there was a local artist and wanted to only get locals to fill up the stadium. It wanted it very much to be like, this is a Vegas thing. So I ended up being one of the artists that they reached out to, and they had us all do pieces that would eventually be on a 48 by 48 canvas. But they also let digital artists, do their thing. So this was a very big file, but it was necessary so that once it printed out, everything would look great. So now they didn't give any like specific prompts really. They had some people do like players and coaches, stuff that would relate back to the team and the history of the team. But with other people, they were like, okay, see what you come up with, send us a sketch for approval, and then we'll go from there. So I sent them this concept of like celebrating the new stadium with a big Raider type character. And my whole concept was like the Desert Raider. So this stadium coming out of the desert, Vegas kind of feels like it's in the middle of the desert. But the Raiders are here and don't mess with us. It's very fun playing with the Raiders as a team because they're like the bad guys of the NFL. Very antagonistic, and that's part of the charm. Hell, like half of the people that show up to Raiders games kind of look like this. Basically, it's very Mad Max meets Pirates,
cool.
But with the silver and black aesthetic. So that piece got done in 2020, and then they printed it and hung up all the stuff in the stadium. And that was it for a little bit. And then once people were able to start going to games, a nice thing that they did with each piece is that they attached a little artist plaque to show like, okay, this is who did it. This is their information. Well, they also had a QR code next to each of it. So you can figure out like, okay, this will take you to their artist page or whatever. Mm-hmm. I guess they told me like yours was like the most searched. Or we got a lot of traffic from
I can imagine
people looking up your piece. And once I was able to share that I did it online, it became very popular within the Raiders like fandom and online circles. And I guess it gotten popular enough to where like the folks that were kind of the in between people between me, the art department, and the actual Raiders higher ups were like, "Hey, do you want to do more of these?" Like, yeah. Me being an artist, a local artist too, I think helped that out. And I think what they saw was like a potential character that they could play around with. And so to the point where like nowadays, or now I regularly do, at least once it's football season again, I will do weekly illustrations for the Raiders to celebrate the wins for each game. So basically it's like, if they win, they'll show the illustration I did. They lose, they just don't show it.
So that's such an interesting conundrum to be in.
Yeah. So the thing is, like a lot of the illustrations are done beforehand.
Yeah.
Usually like a week or two beforehand. I think this year I'm probably going to prep even more beforehand because I'm getting married in November. So I need
Congrats.
to give myself extra. Thank you very much. I need to give myself extra time. So luckily we know the schedule of all the games beforehand. So it's just about like just being playful with a win against whatever team that we're against.
Like a Raider, like holding somebody up with like a knife, like the other mascot and stuff like that. Does it get that brutal, or is it not like that at all?
Well, the only thing with this, they are the Raiders, so we are able to have our fun. But since a lot of the NFL teams are animals, we can't be as rough as maybe we want to be. They're just like, just to cover ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's not have him like, strangling a dolphin. But we have gotten around it in that, like, I have done a piece where he's like riding dolphins, like being pulled by dolphins.
Okay.
Or like riding a bronco.
Yeah.
Being like, okay, your ass is mine, or like I'm in control, So like as long as we're not like violent with them, we're fine. But it also makes it a challenge sometimes because you got to do what's fun, what people will like, and within a certain amount of taste. Because
it's a wide audience, man.
It is a very wide audience, so I'm not about to get like super gory with it as much as I would want to. But it's ended up this design being like a regular thing that people share around a ton, and that's kind of been a part of my growing audience is a giant chunk of Raiders fans. But fortunately, Raiders fans also love like horror and heavy metal, so it's ended up kind of working out. Like I'm very glad that we aren't the Las Vegas Dolphins.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot harder to make that like look badass, than this guy right here. And I feel like this design plays into like my skills as well. I can have a lot of fun with this. And I've now done enough to where like, I'm coming back this year. Going to be doing some more. And it's a very passionate fan base. I've definitely seen all the comments of like people on other teams not being too happy with the pieces that I'll post weekly. But that's part of it. That's part of the fun.
That's so cool. I'm not even like a huge football fan, but that's such an interesting ongoing project and like relationship you've built. That's so neat.
And I love doing it for a local team too.
Yeah.
Like I Vegas, I think in the past like decade has felt more like it's got its own culture, but for the longest time it feels like it's just, a tourism place where it's just, it's almost like a Disneyland version of other people's cultures. Where it's like, oh, come to Paris, come to Caesar's Palace, come to Egypt. But now that we've got Vegas Golden Knights and the Raiders, there's a little bit more of that sense of community, where everybody's rooting for the teams. And that's nice, because we've had that with our Rebels basketball team in the past, but we haven't had teams like this, like major league stuff. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. So Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
That's another one where it might have been 2021 or something, where I think on Twitter there was like a hashtag for like poster artists, and I had done poster designs in the past, but it's all like fan art. But it's also I highly recommend, if you haven't gotten hired by people who do officially licensed posters, then just do fan art, and it'll show at least what you can do with IPs. So if you get a company that does have the licensing for it, they know that you can handle it. So I had shared some of my work that I had done through a hashtag, and then the folks at Vice Press, which are like filled with a bunch of great poster artists who have worked on big name stuff, reached out to me, and they were like, "Hey, we like your stuff. You want to work on a design?" I'm like, hell yeah. And first one they had me do, it was a Darkman one. So I ended up, not on purpose, but being able to do 2 Sam Raimi movies. And the second one was this Evil Dead 2 piece. And Evil Dead 2 is probably like my number one favorite horror movie.
That's so awesome.
I just loved it since I saw it as like a kid. And like this was something where okay, cool. I've got a property where I really have to play into it like a fan, and try to remove myself from it and just think like, what would I want on my wall, or what is a striking image to represent this movie that I haven't seen yet. And because the other problem with doing these older movies is that a lot of them have had awesome illustrated posters. So you have to make yourself stand out.
Army of Darkness, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I had that one has a couple different great posters. But as a kid, I had the Army of Darkness one where it's like him shirtless, like reaching upwards. And he looks so buff and awesome, and in the movie he's like a total dork. It's crazy, the contrast of but it's an amazing poster, and super influential to the kind of approach that I like to use in some of my work these days. But with this design, it was very much about like I told them like I just want it to be like gooey and gross and gory. And another thing that they mentioned was potentially paying tribute to the first movie's poster, which is like the girl kind of reaching outwards at the same angle with I think a hand coming out of the ground.
Was it a horizon line like this one?
Yeah. So like
that has a very unsettling feeling to it,
I mean, there's something to be said about Dutch angles, they are there for a reason, and they also just help with things not being flat. Because I think I initially had it just like coming out almost like Excalibur style, just like straight out of a flat horizon line. And then once we made it diagonal, that just made it like way more dynamic, and it played into the composition of the first movie's poster. So we're kind of paying tribute. We did it, and I think it's sold out now. I've got some copies myself in my shop and everything, just some artist proofs. They're based out of the UK, and they just do tons of this kind of work with different kinds of artists, and they keep things interesting, because these type of alternative movie poster places like them, or Mondo, or I could probably name a bunch others that I have on my
That's a
Instagram.
world I'm not exposed to. So there's a pretty big collector market for this.
Oh yeah, the people who want like alternative movie posters are definitely like big collectors, and especially with these where there's like a limited amount of them too. It just they get more valuable over time. So I was also very thankful that like the Vice Press guys sent me over a certain amount of artist copies for myself. It was a situation where like there's a flat fee for the art, and then I would get a certain amount of prints with it. So it's nice that
you keep the revenue then for all.
Yeah, so that's all mine. Whatever I decided to sell them at, and because they've already sold theirs on their site and everything, and I think they also sold a little bit through Sideshow Collectibles as well. So I think we've got some more ideas for more posters in the future. Just haven't like quite started on those yet, but this is something that I've always wanted to do too. I'm just a big movie fan, and I've always wanted to do movie poster designs, but just nowadays. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I have a couple favorite movies. This is probably, it's in the top 5, definitely. Like, but in terms of horror movies, yeah, Evil Dead 2 is just like it's always made me the most happy. And it's one that, like, if somebody hasn't seen it, I want to invite them over for like a watch party, because they'll very likely have a lot of fun with it.
Nice. And this was the last one, so I think we're good there. Well, we're about 3 hours in. We've covered a lot of ground.
Oh yeah, man, 3 hours? Damn.
Nice. Kind of just flew by.
It's a big chunky one, but yeah, it did fly by.
That was a great time. I have my final question. Before we get to that, were there any other things you wanted to talk about?
I mean, I just wanted to hear like what like some of your favorite working artists in the metal genre. Like who do you like? Maybe not who you're trying to be like in terms of style, but like who like makes you think like, man, I want to do stuff like that. You know?
I'll ask you the same question. I'll go first if you want. So funnily enough, a lot of my inspiration doesn't come from metal genre. But the artists that I enjoy looking at their work the most and like speaks to me that are contemporary, I'd say Lucas from Shoggoth Kinetics. His work really resonates with me. I like the sci-fi angle, his use of texture. I see some of the things that I want to accomplish in my own way with his work. I'm in absolute awe over the craftsmanship of Tyler from Creep from 6 Feet Deep. Have you seen his work?
I'll look it up. I'll probably recognize it as soon as I see it.
He just did a poster for the Fulci tour.
Okay,
It was an Oxygen Destroyer. I'm trying to remember. He's done work with Fulci, but and he did a poster for that latest Black Dahlia Murder tour as well. But yeah, it had Frozen Soul on it. But yeah, his craftsmanship's unreal. He's doing everything by hand too.
Well, and Fulci always gets like that. Okay. So he did the line work poster,
right?
For them, Tour of the Living Dead.
Yeah,
is that it? Oh yeah, that artwork is insane.
His abilities are unreal. So from a technical perspective, I'll definitely look at like his hatching techniques and just how he does things. And I'm like, okay, I'm learning things here and there. You know, hopefully as a mind.
But yeah, we all learn from each other.
You know.
Yeah. Well, and his style too, like that's one where like you zoom in and see how much of it's like, oh, it's just dots. But the way he does it is just like that's its own skill, like hatch work and dot work, where like they're able to figure out how to lay those things out in a way. I was
definitely channeling some of like, I was looking at his stuff and was just like, how is he accomplishing this and this? And naturally, when it comes out of my hand, it's different. But then I get a lot of inspiration from tattoo artists, and then I've been really into specifically Philippe Drouet, the French comic artist who did Lone Sloan. He's got a Lone Sloan book coming out at the end of this year, but he's a relatively recent find for me. But it's like everything I want to accomplish is like in his kind of world, but obviously, once again, doing it in my own way. But I saw his work and I was just like, this speaks to me and like what I want to try to do.
Yeah.
So I do draw a lot from people who aren't in metal as well. There's
Well,
a
that's
guy
good.
out of Australia. He's a tattooer and a artist. He's like a surreal biomech kind of artist, but his name's Trevor Bennett. I'm really intrigued by his work right now. He's a really friendly guy. Unfortunately, he has cancer right now, but I've been messaging with him a little bit. Just incredible technique, and I love how free he is with his ideas. I'm very intrigued by Brad Moore's work, but I don't think anything I'd accomplish would be in his vein. But yeah, I try to do a lot of inspiration from old fantasy artists like you do as well, and then I've been getting more and more into comic related art, like Philippe. But yeah, I'd say those are the things that are really kind of top of mind right now.
I mean, I can see, especially with this sort of stuff that you're working on, like looking at old heavy metal issues. Like there's probably tons
Mobius,
of stuff
for sure.
in there. Yeah, like he's obviously the king of that sort of stuff, but there's just tons of both comic art and painted like illustrations in those issues that are just full of the kind of stuff that you can pull from and see like, oh, this is how this guy does creatures. This is how this guy does backgrounds. Like how can I make that work for my own stuff?
And I love recurring tattoo imagery. So I love, like, I can see hundreds of artists paint a Black Panther, but they all do it in their own way. And I love that kind of concept of like going off of a recurring theme, but then putting your own style on it. I think it like comes back to, I don't know, just a love for concept art, but then also like, I don't know where I'm going with that idea, but basically I just love seeing people's different takes on the same type of subject matter. I think that's always kind of,
oh yeah, same here. Like I'll always be down for some, like, show me a sword. Like, yeah, I just want to see what your sword or flail looks like, because I think like those are just designs that are inherently cool by themselves. Or like a bat. I can't get enough of somebody drawing a bat somehow. It's just like a cool looking animal that it always shows people's style through how they figure out the wings, like what kind of bat is it? Do they lean into the vampire stuff, or is it more of a realistic sort of thing? Is it cute? Is it scary? And I think that helps whenever we try to tackle that subject matter. Forces us to be like, so what is my version of that? Like, what am I bringing to the table? And you start to, I mean, there's a certain amount of figuring out like, okay, what have people done before? Do I want to completely avoid that? Do I want to play into it? It's hard to be like 100% like just original, like, but sometimes you just gotta like, okay, just do one and see what comes out and see what you like about it.
I got one more that I want to name drop. There's a guy, another tattooer, but his name's Water Street Phantom. Dude, his stuff, he takes, I love Japanese art, not as much anime and like manga, more like classical Japanese. And then I also like the Final Fantasy concept art a lot.
Oh yeah.
So Amaro, I just bought a huge book set of Amaro, like ink drawings and stuff. And I'm going to like pour over that, maybe study a couple of the pieces. But Water Street Phantom, his sense of flow and shape design, I absolutely love.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, and like some of this chrome stuff is insane.
I want an art book of his stuff so bad, as well as there's a tattoo artist. He's been around for a long time. His name's Grime, but he's one of those guys who started in the '90s, got a pretty big name. But Grime recently had a piece at the Year of the Tiger show that was in California. That I loved it. It had like these like pink flesh tones with like this like chrome panther thing, like just iconic, raw in the right ways, unrefined in the right ways, but then tight in the right spots. I mean, I am trying to do more like loose gestural and then bring it to a really tight point. Like that's something I'm trying to focus on.
That's how almost every one of my pieces is, where it's just like super sloppy, and then it's just all about like, how do I make this thing have
I would not say any of your work is sloppy, but I get what you're saying
initially. But it's all about polishing the slop, but also like, how do I keep the sketch energy all the way through? Because that's the hardest part, where like I feel like once a sketch is refined, it loses a lot of its movement and personality. Yep. It's hard to keep that all the way through without like really figuring out like, okay, how are my brush strokes accentuating this? How am I implying movement if I want to? All that sort of stuff.
Once the bones are in, you lose your gesture if you didn't have it to begin with. So I'm with you. Exactly. What about you in terms of artists that are inspiring you?
Like my big ones, just in general, like if I were to like, put into a blender what makes me, it's probably Frank Frazetta, number one.
Oh, yeah.
And then Dave Raposa. He's he's a current working artist. He is somebody who's over the years like done a lot of concept art for movies. I think he got very famous by doing these realistic portraits of like 80s cartoon characters. So he did ones of like the Ninja Turtles that got very popular. And he's like, for a while he did like portfolio critiques online. Like he would stream. This was before Twitch too, where he would help out like artists within the community by doing like challenges and stuff, and having people submit their sketches of ideas that they would have like that month or whatever, and then critique them and help them out. And through watching a lot of his stuff, it really helped me figure out like values were super developed through his work, and then how he would make like cartoony stuff look more realistic. And that kind of helped define how I like to approach things sometimes, because I think naturally I just draw very in a cartoony fashion, but I don't want to be a goofy artist, if that makes any sense. Totally. So it's finding a way to find that balance that communicates the stuff in a detailed way, even when you're playing with slightly like heightened, maybe sometimes humorous material. So the balance of that with like classic, either Frazetta, San Julian, Jeffrey Catherine Jones, like those like 70s, 80s fantasy artists. A mix of those are like...
You didn't mention any like traditional metal artists either, which I think is interesting, because that's how you add new spice to it, man.
Yeah, I mean, like Frazetta, like his stuff has been licensed to plenty of folks over the years. I know, like probably his big ones weren't even for metal records; they were for like Molly Hatchet. Yeah. It doesn't sound anything like those covers.
Totally misleading.
Yeah, and I think Wolfmother used like the Sea Witch piece on one of theirs, so that was maybe another really famous one. I want to say Mastodon used like some of his work, not for like album covers, but for like promo stuff or merch. But I think Raposa, I think he's done some album artwork for like video game soundtracks or movie soundtracks, but nowadays he does like primarily a Patreon, He has his own comic called Steve Lichman, which is like a parody of D&D like fantasy tropes, and it's hilarious.
Okay,
It's
nice.
great. I would look it up. It's a phenomenal comic, super funny.
It's an interesting name for a comic.
Yeah, it's great. If you type in Steve Lichman, you'll find a bunch of like little bits of like a couple panels, and they're super funny. And then nowadays he does a lot of stuff for big IPs. So I think he's been doing a lot of Magic work now. And he just revealed like some of the stuff he did for their Lord of the Rings line that they just announced.
Sick.
So like he's definitely somebody that I look up to, who has helped me kind of like figure out how to get by certain hurdles when I was like really figuring out digital art. And just sometimes his approach to things like helps me like figure out how to make an inherently like flat cartoony thing look more 3D and have some like real power behind it.
It sounds like he's one of those guys that you have the voice in the back of your head. He's like, what would he do?
Yeah, you know? not necessarily like in style, but in like approach towards
decision making,
making a image effective.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that like Frazetta was very much something where like that's the guy that made me like want to be a painter illustrator. Like I drawn since I was a kid, but he made me, you know, probably when I was 11 or 12, just like, oh, that's what can be done. Okay. Yeah. I want to push my career towards that.
Have you seen the new Taschen book?
No, I haven't. Do you have it? Yeah, let me see. Let me see.
So, as far as I know, this is the most complete body of his work, and it is massive and it is heavy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this thing is
Look at that.
If anything, it's too big, but you get some really... And you see all his stuff. Like, I love his ink work.
Oh,
it's like from like the 60s. Like he knew exactly when to just go just solid black, and you know when to have those light little elements.
That's another thing that like I always try to look at his stuff and be like, how much information he's able to communicate through stuff that up close is pretty simple, and he would do these really fast too. So he wasn't like being overly precious with anything.
No,
it's crazy.
His setup was. Sorry to
go ahead. Yeah.
But dude, he just had like, as far as I know, a single light bulb. They just had the oil, you know, right in front of him, and he deliberately. I think it was just because he was cheap. He used a lot of cheap oil paints, and a lot of his stuff really hasn't held up that well over time, unfortunately. But he was notorious for using really cheap paints.
Like you didn't seal them or anything, or
just low quality paints, like not expensive paints.
Like they'd show up probably wet to the clients, I'd imagine.
That, and then just what's the word I'm looking for? What's it? Light something. Light fast. His oil paints were not very light fast. So they would adjust color over time in a bad way.
Yeah, that's why like over the years I've kind of seen. I mean, he would also unfortunately go back into pieces and fix them. And from what I can tell, oftentimes like the first version is my preferred version, but sometimes they'd be cool. But he didn't want to do like another piece. He would just paint on top of the other one. It's crazy.
Yeah. Him and I mean, for me growing up, the first artist that really like blew my mind, that's, you know, a legend would be Dolly for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like
Dolly's amazing.
When I saw Dolly stuff, I mean, I was always the kid trying to make things surreal before I had the capabilities to do that. So I've always been drawn to his art.
Have you ever seen
my like hero?
Have you seen his stuff in person?
Yeah. Yeah, they had an exhibit in Atlanta. Yeah, like Persistence of Memory is really tiny. But his later stuff, the religious pieces, where he had like apprentices and shit.
Huge, right?
Fucking massive, man.
Yeah. It was in it. I can't remember where, but in high school, I was fortunate enough to go on a art school trip to Europe, and we saw a couple Dali pieces in person, and I was just shocked by how small they were. and just like big pieces, like famous pieces too that I had seen in art class. Like, like this big, it crazy. But he was amazing. Everything like looked great, and sometimes it's only in person where you can actually see like the human in them, where you could see the brush strokes and see how things are separated and everything. But it still like looks amazing.
Yeah, I kind of realize now more so, and I'm obviously like, I'm just me. I'm not trying to be like a critique of Dali, but like, I used to think that he was like the technical master, but now I see technically still better than almost everybody, but he's more of an idea master, I think.
Yeah. He was more about, like, his thing is about making surreal things like look very tangible.
Yeah.
So that was his wheelhouse. But in terms of, making, like, I guess what you would call photoreal versions of things, he was less interested in. And the impact of the piece was what he was all about.
Yeah. Well, my wife's texted me. We got to go to Home Depot soon. I want to wrap up with my
No problem.
last question. So what are, you've distilled it throughout the interview as well, but what would be like some advice you would have for people interested in creating art for bands or IP of any sort, just kind of what you've done? Let's say you went back, and told advice to, 22-year-old James. What would it be?
Man, I my main thing would be, I mean, first I'd be like, you're gonna make all sorts of mistakes and you're gonna make bad art. It's okay. You don't have to have everything figured out. Some artists like make it later in life. Some start really early. You're on your own path. Try not to be too hard on yourself. Mm-hmm. My next thing would be like, make a portfolio of the kind of work that you want to do. And that seems like, maybe an obvious duh, but I think a lot of artists focus too much on like, I need to show all my skills. I need to show I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to get hired by? What's the kind of stuff that you would actually have fun making and you would enjoy being told to do every day, told to make a living off of? That's the kind of stuff you want to fill your portfolio up with. And that doesn't like, my approach has kind of been like fake it till you make it. So my thing is like, well, if I want to make stuff that looks like it would be an album cover, then format it in a way to where it could totally work like that. Or if I wanted to make poster designs, make some cool looking fan posters. You don't have to wait for somebody to hire you. There's plenty of people that, Dave Raposa, who I mentioned earlier, big influence to me. Like, he got picked up because he did fan art that got really popular online, and then other big IPs wanted to start hiring him to do stuff. He's now doing stuff for Marvel and all that. I would say focus on the stuff that really either makes you happy while working on it, or the stuff that's like aspiring to be in the actual realm that you want to be creatively. Because it's very easy, I think, as an artist early on to try to just like be technically good and show people that I can do this. I can be a graphic designer. I can do portraits. I can do landscapes. Like, okay, fine. But ultimately, if you want to be an anime artist, man, put all your essence into becoming a kick-ass anime artist, because that's what your interests are going to be. My thing is like, I can now easily do metal covers and communicate with metal artists and fans alike because I'm a fan. Like that's what I'm into. That's my world. When I'm want to feel good, I listen to metal music. I envelop myself in that world. So I think it's all about like pointing towards the thing that would creatively make you happy. And that doesn't mean it's going to pay off immediately. It took me quite a while to get where I am. And I had to take some time to work some crappy graphic design jobs, to also figure out what my style is, what my interests were and weren't. And, that's not an easy thing to figure out. But now I'm in it. I've kind of figured it out. I have a trajectory. But this is also, even in this space right now, I'm still figuring things out left and right, where I'm learning hard lessons all the time, whether it's like clients that I should have asked for more from, or taking on too many pieces at once, and then I screw over any of my downtime and I burn myself out, or I'm not able to see friends and all that. It's all sorts of balancing, but like, if you're gonna go through all that, you might as well be doing stuff that you really like doing rather than stuff you feel like you have to do. So yeah, that'd be my number one thing.
Oh, that's very well said. Well, hey, anybody who's tuned into the end, and I hope you have, please check out James's Instagram. His website is extremely well done. He has an online store. Still has a couple of those Evil Dead prints, at least as of today. As of the release date of this video, you'll have to find out. So go to his website. But yeah, and then any bands that are interested in commissioning him, of course, he charges.
I'm easy to find.
But yes, send him a message. Why not?
Yeah. I'm always checking, so I'm attached to this thing. So I'll get back to you pretty soon.
Good to hear. Well, that's a wrap. James, you can stay on just for a second. Everybody else, new episode. Trying to do about 2 to 3 a month. So I'll see you guys around. Thank you.
Take care, man.